Air resistance, not air resistance.
No.
You've got to get the subtlety.
Absolutely. Councillor Gavin James, how are you?
Very well, how are you?
Yeah, great, thank you. It's good to see you.
Is Ken Rattigan in on this meeting?
Yes, he is.
I'm going then.
Yeah. if you switch to Garrett.
Oh, that's very harsh, Gavin, I think.
Is there a view I can switch to where I can't see him or hear him?
Yeah, if you switch to the active speaker.
Very fair.
There must be a good-looking people only button on this, but I can't find it.
Well, if you want to look at yourself, fine.
I just wanted to look at you, Paul.
We just to remind everybody, the webcast is live.
Yep, fine.
In that case, I'm Councillor Paul Harvey, and I apologise for all the comments I just made.
In the famous words, you do not have any authority here, Councillor Gavin.
Oh gosh,
I love it. I love it.
Right, 3 minutes to go, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Councillor Konesko. How are you? Just to warn you, Councillor Konesko, the meeting is live and being recorded for YouTube. Two minutes to go, councillors. Good evening, Councillor Watts. Okay, just to warn you that we are recording.
Evening, thank you.
Good evening. Councillor Cubitt, good evening. Just to let you know that we are recording. All right, councillors, it's 6:30, and I would like to start the meeting. So just to go through the meeting preamble, I am Councillor Stuart Frost, the Chair of Economic Planning and Housing, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this meeting, which is being held virtually and in accordance with the Council's rules for virtual meetings, which reflect the recently published government regulations. The meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will also be available to view after the meeting has finished. Councillors who sit on this committee are identified by name on the screen, and I will introduce officers by name before they address the committee. Councillors are reminded that although this meeting is being held remotely, they are regarded as being present in a meeting of the council and that they should observe the normal rules of behaviour under the members' code of conduct and not allow members of their household to distract them during the course of the meeting. Please can members ensure that the mobile phones are now switched off or are on silent, and members of the committee will turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they have been invited to speak by myself as chair. Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote taken on the item under discussion. Members can indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand electronically and should only speak when I, as chair, invite them to do so. Officers present will only switch on their video link during the item that they are presenting or where they wish to be invited to speak by me as chair. As chair, I will confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda who will address the committee by audio link. Councillors should declare that they are leaving the meeting and switch off their video link if they have a disclosable interest. Okay. What I'd like to do is have a look at the agenda. Okay, and do we have any apologies for absence and substitutions? I think we're all here. Sadie, do you have any?
Councillor Waldridge isn't present at the moment, but I have no apologies or anything.
Okay. Right, okay. So then we'll go on to item number 2. Does anybody have any declarations of interest that they wish to declare? No? Okay, so that's that one. Okay, so item number 3. Okay, I've been advised there are no urgent matters unless anybody has an urgent matter to raise. No. Okay. Right. Okay, so I'd like to go on to item number 4, the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th and the 14th of January, which are pages 5 to 16. Does anybody have any questions, comments on the minutes or on the accuracy of the minutes? Yes, no? Councillor Laura James.
Sorry, it's page 8. It was just to clarify that in relation to the agreed action, in relation to the green infrastructure action plan, that when it comes forward to our committee, that it will be the 35 actions of that action plan.
Okay.
And also going on to that minute, and then going on to a further minute on page 12. I know that we were sent the risk assessment in relation to the IFS. Is it possible? I would really like to ask some questions. I won't ask it tonight, but I was wondering if an officer could ring me to talk through so I understood better that risk assessment, because I had lots of questions. If I could ask an officer could ring me regarding that. And in relation to page 15.
So, sorry, Councillor James. I noticed that Ruth O'Mara was nodding there, so I'm assuming she'll get one of her team to actually give you a call.
That's okay. Lovely. And,
and then, sorry, page 15? On
page 15, I think it's requested, we requested it in relation to the minutes of the AMR, sorry. Okay. It's about all the different studies that are outstanding. That's the 4th bullet point down on page 15. And okay. Can we pick that up tonight under additional work, please? So I just want to flag that up, please, that we look at all of those assessments and have a discussion rather than doing it now.
Okay, all right, okay.
Thank you.
Under the work programme.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Is that everything for you?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, right. Is there anybody else who has questions or wants to comment on the minutes of the meeting? Okay, no. Right, so what I'll do is I will move those from the chair, okay, and ask for a seconder, please.
Sorry, Chair. Councillor Rathel and Councillor Watts have got their hands up.
All right, okay, I do beg your pardon. Councillor Watts, please, first.
It's not related to the minutes, Chair. It's just that Councillor Wardridge has just WhatsApped me, and she's just running late. She's got a few IT problems. And she's
no, she's here. She's in.
So yeah.
Hello, Councillor Wardridge. How are you?
Oh, there you go.
Have you joined us? Thank you, Councillor Watts. We'll just wait a minute. Hello, Councillor Wardridge. Thank you for joining us. You're on mute. Okay, Councillor Rathel, please.
Hi, sorry I'm a bit late. I got caught up with IT problems, so I'm here now. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you, Councillor Wardridge.
For anyone who hasn't got video, that wasn't me. Just to say that I wanted to make some comments on the minutes. Firstly, on page 8, that there was suggested when debating the green infrastructure strategy that areas of outstanding natural beauty should be recognised an important partner in achieving the green infrastructure strategy. I agree with that, and I'm hoping the council get an opportunity to consider whether EPH should look at this in more detail in due course. And I hope that opportunity will come forward perhaps at the next full council meeting. Secondly, it was requested that going forward, the BIS initiative take account of the allotment network and B-lines project throughout the borough. I'm starting the process of looking at whether we can roll out the BIS initiative, because although it's not in the minutes, members said that they were enthusiastic about it. And it's important that we look at whether it should be an incremental rollout or it's something that could be scaled up quite significantly. There's obviously resource implications and the management and staff and everything in relation to that. It was also mentioned in the final bullet point about the importance of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. I've set up a meeting with them, I think in 2 weeks' time, to discuss their work in the borough and how that is going forwards. So I thought that members might be interested to hear that. And finally, on the minutes on page 13, there was a degree of incisive analysis over the way the current local plan had been functioning, especially in relation to the fact that the large allocation sites had not yet delivered. Today I have put up online for consideration the Cabinet taking the view, well, I'm taking the view as portfolio holder, to looking at proactively 2 sites, which are named in the appendix, with a view to seeing whether they can be progressed swiftly. And if they can, then that ought to deal with the 5-year land supply situation very quickly, subject to obviously to whether those sites are appropriate for getting planning permission in the usual way. So I just thought members might be interested that I've been acting on what they've said on previous occasions.
Thank you, Councillor Rathel. Okay, so I'd like to move the minutes from the chair. Okay, do I have a seconder?
Happy to do that, Councillor Frost.
Canesco. Okay, right. So then moving on to item number 5. Okay, update from Councillor Laura James on the policy SS9 task and finish group. Councillor James.
Thank you very much. can I just apologise to members that we didn't get a report out to you tonight in time for the meeting. Our last meeting that we had as part of this group was on Tuesday evening. The report has been written by members, but it didn't meet the 5-day deadline to get it to you. So obviously that will be circulated at a future date. I'd just like to say as well, a really big thank you to everybody that took part in the meetings, those members who were part of the group, but also all of the officers who supported the group and the external partners. It was a really good piece of work. It was quite short term. We had 4 meetings. Historically, before I was involved, there was another 2 meetings that took place. And it was to look at SS9. And I guess, does everybody know what SS9 is and whether we need to read that out as to what that is? But I think we did a lot of analysis and we came up with some very good recommendations. It was decided that we would have 3 overview large recommendations, and sitting underneath that is a piece of work describing as to why we came up with those recommendations. And then further to that was all the supporting documents that we had that enabled us to make those decisions. And then following that, we also had further actions that we would like this committee to consider. I think for us, it raised some really significant concerns about what we identified. And I think that it's important that we as a committee have that debate in future, so we can actually explore those concerns with you in relation to the 3 overview, the 3 concerns that we 3 recommendations that we came up with. One was that we felt that SS9 should stay as the same as in the near future. We didn't want to see changes. In relation to the second recommendation, we'd like to see some checks and balances into the cabinet decisions on major projects. I think that's an important area that we felt needs to be looked at. And the other one is, the third recommendation was oversight of major projects looked at in relation to the procurement process as well. So it's much more detailed than that, but it was a significant piece of work. I think we worked well as a group. I think it was a really good example of task and finish and how a piece of work could be done. We was able to look at documents that we have historically not been able to look at, and I thank the officers for sharing those with us. I think that's important if we're going to do this sort of piece of work. I don't know if there's anyone within the group that'd like to say anything about the process. I think it would be really useful if they did, but I think it needs to be timetabled onto the agenda and moving forward. And I think from this piece of work, it also identified, I think, future pieces of work that this committee might want to take forward. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Laura James. Does anybody else on the task and finish group want to comment? Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Just to say a big thank you to Sadie, who facilitated the task and finish panel. Huge thanks to members who were on it. I thought it was incredibly constructive and useful. And in terms of, not just the scrutiny function of this particular committee, but it was the forward-looking element. It just showed, I think, what we can do as a council with a group of members looking at a specific area and having a proper investigation into it. I know others have taken place, but it was very useful. So going forward, I think it's potentially a model to look at for us in doing things in the future. But in this particular area, I look forward to the debate at committee on the substantive things that fell out of this particular task and finish panel, which I think are really important for us. Some big lessons learned, I hope.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Okay, Councillor Cubitt, please.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to concur with Councillor Harvey. It was extremely well chaired by Councillor James as well. It was cross-party, it was very collaborative. Interestingly, across the political divide, we all seem to completely agree with the findings, and the chairman, makes reference to the 3 overarching macro recommendations that we as a group made, but we also came up with some significant and very detailed action points which were proposed by cross-party members that are very significant and will definitely improve the workings of our council going forward if they are looked into and treated with the hopes that we and the respect that we hope they are. Thanks a million.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Can you please lower your hand, please, Councillor Cubitt, unless you've got another. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, we've got the debate on this scheduled with the paper at our next meeting, which, as I understand it, Sadie, I think is June the 4th. Is that correct?
I thought it was June the 10th.
Okay.
Yes,
I'm
June the 10th.
Okay, June the 10th. Do you have a copy of the paper ready to circulate?
I do have a copy, but I believe officers wish to review it.
Right. Okay. No, I wasn't suggesting review it. I just wanted to make sure that you actually had a copy, and you can send it out with the minutes for the next meeting.
Yes.
Okay. Great. That's wonderful. Does anybody else on the task and finish group want to make a comment? No. Okay, Councillor Laura James, thank you very much for taking forward that task and finish group. Okay, I'm really pleased that we've come up with some cracking recommendations, and I look forward to receiving the report and reading the further declaration, the further recommendations. Okay, in due course. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the next item, please, if we're finished with item number 5. Okay, so item number 6, update on the economic recovery in response to COVID-19. And if we just have a minute so that we can arrange for the relevant officers. Okay, we've got Jack Kennedy. Obviously, leader will probably want to say a few things. Okay, as is his wont. Okay, Jack, hello Daniel, how are you? Okay, that's good. Okay, Jack, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Chair. I'm going to share some slides, so hopefully this will come up on your screens.
Yeah, we've got them there.
Brilliant. I'm Jack Kennedy, the Economic Development Manager, and coming to speak to you tonight regarding a promised update on the work relating to the Economic Recovery Framework that I presented back in September last year. So I'm looking to take you through sort of the context of where do we stand now, what we've seen in terms of local indicators and the impact locally on businesses and individuals in Basingstoke and Deane, what our response has been primarily in the short term in terms of financial support that's been provided to businesses, then talking through what we've achieved through the Economic Recovery Framework already, and thinking about then what's going to be in the future. So this first slide I'm presenting not as a means to sort of start with the most bamboozling slide possible with too much going on it, but it's just a visual representation of what businesses have been through over the past 12 months, and it's quite staggering, of course, the sort of the number of different periods that businesses have had to navigate since March 2020, as we've gone through various periods of lockdown, local restrictions, and periods when the economy has been more open. And one thing I'd really like to raise is that since I came to the EPH in September, in terms of Basingstoke and Deane alone, we've been through periods of being in Tier 1, then into national lockdown, then into Tier 2 in December, then into Tier 4 for a short period, and then since the 5th of January into national lockdown again. So clearly the work that we've done around economic recovery has been shaped by what's been going on at a national level and the context that our businesses and our borough operates in. So thinking about the impact of COVID-19 and the paper that I shared, and hopefully you've all had the opportunity to read, goes into more detail on a number of factors that we've seen over the last few weeks and months. And I could have sort of thrown a lot of charts and different data at this slide, but I wanted to reflect on some of the most important things that we've been seeing at a local level. If we take the first point around high street change, I think when you look at some of the names at the bottom of that slide, they're not names that you would have been surprised about not existing on the high street in the next sort of 5 to 10 years time frame, because a number of them have been struggling with the rise of online sales for a sustained period. But what has happened with COVID-19 has been that acceleration of change within the high street and within our town centres. And when we think about Basingstoke town centre in particular, footfall levels have been generally at 25 to 30% of the same period the year before during periods of lockdown. And even when periods of, sort of the economy being slightly more open, so when we think about the summer or just before Christmas, we're still looking at levels at about 75% of the year before. So considerably lower footfall than our retailers have had to enjoy in previous times. And that's obviously going to have a knock-on impact. I think if we look at things like benefit claimants, out of work support claimants, and the data around furlough, you can see in the top right graph, there's been a significant increase in the number of people accessing out of work support over the past 12 months. And that graph shows an average number of claimants since 1992. And we're at a level now that we haven't seen since 1994. And I think I made the point last time I came to the committee, but it still is fairly resonant in that we're seeing an increase above and beyond the sort of scale of increase that we saw in the 2008 to 2010 financial crisis period. And although we have a very mixed economy and that has served us well in terms of responding to economic shocks, clearly COVID-19 is having an impact well beyond anything we've seen in the last 20, 25 years. So government support for businesses and individuals is still widely accessed, and it's still obviously critical to survival. In the second graph, you can see the number of residents on furlough. Whilst that has decreased quite dramatically since the early period of the lockdown last year, so May, June time, we are seeing an increase again in terms of the number of people who are being supported through furlough. And the latest data for January, which is an update to the report that was sent out because it's just come out, that data shows that 12,000 residents were on furlough in January. That's provisional data at the moment, so it might well change. But clearly businesses are still accessing that kind of support to help them get through this period. And actually we're also seeing businesses within Basingstoke, and I am particularly talking here about the parliamentary constituency of Basingstoke because this is how the data is held, but businesses within that parliamentary constituency have also accessed around £70 million worth of loan support since March 2020. So that's a significant amount of funding that will need to be paid back at some point. With this as a backdrop, for us it becomes quite difficult to predict the future of how people will work, where that will take place, and how do we position Basingstoke and Deane as a great place to work and to invest in. I'm sure you may have had similar experiences of seeing a number of different articles in recent weeks around whether the office is dead for the future, whether the sort of the mixed way of working between working from home and being in an office is going to be the way forward, or if actually businesses think that the return to the office is the only way to go about it, and see that as critical for how they collaborate and how they work as an organisation. I've certainly seen a number of articles that have taken all three of these approaches and said that will be the future. And it's therefore difficult to know exactly how we need to position Basingstoke-on-Deane as a great place to work and what the kind of offer we need to present to businesses going forward. Of course, we do have relationships with lots of businesses, and we keep on having engagement with them to understand what their future looks like in the borough. But many have yet to take a full decision about how they'll utilise their office space going forward. But on a note of optimism, I think we're also seeing positive things that have come out of COVID-19 in terms of the economic impact. And one of the things that I think we're seeing is people reconnecting with local services and local goods, whether that's sort of stuff that's happening the market at top of town, or accessing local deliveries for any goods or services. People have been reminded that that actually where their goods come from is important to them, and have reconnected back in with local providers. And one of the things we've done, which I'll come on to later, is set up the borough basket to try and capitalise on that momentum. So I think this slide has been probably shown before. You've seen versions of this previously, but it's worth just reflecting on the scale of the support that was provided in the first lockdown. And we're talking about £55 million worth of either rates relief or business grants awarded to thousands of businesses within Basingstoke-on-Deane. And that was just to cover the first period of lockdown. And that support has really been the focus of economic help and recovery in recent months. Since November 2020, we've allocated an additional £10.8 million worth of support through the periods of lockdown and local restrictions, and then back into lockdown. And one of the things I'd really want to focus on here is that top line around the support provided through the additional restrictions grant, because that has been a truly discretionary grant that we've been given the power to decide how we want to use it to support our local economies. And it's enabled us to support businesses who at a national level or don't have the same level of support. So I'm sure you'll have heard things around limited company directors being excluded from whether that's furlough help or self-employment help. And we've been able to use this grant scheme as a means to support those kind of businesses, because Basingstoke is made up of 99.5% SMEs, and those smaller independent businesses are critical to our local economy. So being able to keep them afloat has been really important. It's worth noting that at this point, we've had to take a pause on utilisation of the ARG, the additional restrictions grant, just because it is a limited amount of funding, and it's there to support businesses all the way through to March 2022. And we've had to, there's a risk that the demand is going to outstrip the supply of funding that we have available. So we will have to think in the near future, especially after the budget announcements yesterday, think about how we target the remaining funding that we have to support businesses, and that we keep enough of it available to support them all the way through to March next year. So that's really a whistle-stop tour of the kind of short-term support that we've had to really focus on, and has been a large proportion of the work that we've done over the last 4 or 5 months since November 2020. And whilst that is great in the short term, and it's very much needed, we've of course need to consider how we provide longer term support. So as you remember, when we brought this to EPH in September and then approved by Cabinet in October, we have our economic recovery framework, which is a transition really from the immediate crisis management work that is around supporting via grants and the sticking plaster of providing financial support to help businesses sustain themselves during lockdowns, through to developing a longer term plan for recovery. And it builds upon our economic growth strategy, which was adopted in March 2019, And hopefully you remember that we set out 9 priority areas with clean growth at the heart of the change. So this work is aligned with the work that's being done around the climate change and air quality strategy and the ambitions we have as an authority in relation to our climate emergency. So, I mean, a lot of this information is in the report, but I just thought to try and bring a few of the achievements that we've had under the economic recovery framework and the things we set out as actions that we wanted to take under the different themes. It's worth just highlighting a few achievements. So in terms of innovation and technology, in the longer term, the things we want to do is make sure that we're capitalizing on having the best available broadband connectivity, fiber, etc., and also 5G connectivity within the borough. But actually, one of the short-term interventions that we've taken has been around supporting our independent and smaller businesses to move to having a digital e-commerce platform for them to supplement how they are operating and really to help them during periods of lockdown. And that is our Borough Basket, which is our e-commerce marketplace for local and independent businesses. At the moment, we have about 45 businesses listed on there, and they're all sort of smaller and independent from all across the borough, not just town centre ones, but across Whitchurch, Overton, and in many other neighbourhoods as well. It's been a great way of businesses having a platform that is easy for them to use, cost effective for them to use, and they have the support to move on to a digital platform, which they may have been fearful or found difficult to do so before. So that's been a really great start under that innovation and technology theme, and it's something that we want to carry on and build upon and utilise to get more and more independent businesses across the borough involved. When we think about things like jobs and skills, obviously the graph that I showed earlier shows quite a stark picture at a local level in terms of unemployment. And although we still sit in a pretty good position compared to a national picture and even compared to the wider southeast, there's clearly work that we want to do. So we have developed a bid for a tri-borough youth hub, working with Rushmore and Hart councils to develop a one-stop shop across the 3 boroughs where 16 to 24-year-olds will be able to access support to move into employment or training. And we are awaiting authorisation from DWP for the funding for that. But we are confident that that will happen and we'll be able to start delivery in the near future. And we've also been working as a partner with Enterprise M3 and Hampshire County Council on the launch of the Apprenticeship and Skills Hub, which is a means for businesses to access support, to understand their skills needs, and to have an independent advisor go in and tell them all the opportunities they can access around apprenticeships, around Kickstart scheme, around traineeships, work experience, all the different routes that they can take and the funding that's available to them to access the right skills for their business. So that only kicked off during National Apprenticeship Week a few weeks ago in February, and we'll be continuing to work on that over the next few months. And then on the place shaping activity, hopefully you will have seen that the launch of the consultation on our town centre master plan, which is a great stepping stone for us to have as we work towards diversifying our town centre and thinking about how we make it a vibrant, exciting place that fits the future of what town centres will need to be. And that work will continue over the next 6 months. And I don't need to go into all of the detail here, but again, there have been a number of achievements across different themes, and it's just worth pointing out the establishment of our Love Basingstoke portal website that works as a single destination for place marketing of Basingstoke and Deane as a borough. So it brings together that unified approach of promoting the area, whether you want to come to visit, come to work, come to live or invest in the borough. It's that one-stop shop for people to access and be able to present a unified approach to how we want to market the area, which is, when you look at the approach that other major cities and towns across the UK and across the world take, it is always that sort of that single narrative that they have around what makes their place special and why people should come. So that's now being mirrored in Basingstoke and Deane, and yeah, on the clean growth side, hopefully the adoption of the climate change and air quality strategy in the near future as well. And again, as I said earlier, work will continue to make sure that the work of the economic recovery framework truly aligns with those ambitions. I think as we look to the future, you will all be aware of the sort of pathway that's been set out earlier this month, or last month, sorry, around the timelines for how the economy will be able to open again. And there'll be a number of different stages that businesses will start to be able to open. And obviously that's going to present critical challenges for our businesses, but also for us as we think about how we safely reopen our town centre and high streets across the borough, and make sure that businesses are operating in the correct way, but are being provided with the support they need to reopen. And then I guess it's worth reflecting, obviously we're 24 hours after the budget, and this obviously couldn't be reflected in the paper that was shared, but just some of the key highlights that are going to be important for both businesses and individuals within the borough set out here. And from a business perspective, some of the things around having greater clarity of knowing that the extension of the furlough scheme is there until September. For retail, hospitality and leisure businesses, both the grants that will be made available to them and the rates relief for a certain period is also going to be particularly helpful. And there's, as well as all the things that are listed here, there's a lot of opportunities that as a local authority we'll have to get to grips with, namely the sort of levelling up fund, the community's ownership fund, the community renewal fund, and the towns fund. I mean, these are all opportunities that we'll have to consider in line with our economic recovery framework, and think about how do we maximise funding that is made available to local authorities to help their economies. And of course, the opportunity that exists around free ports, and the announcement that was made that there will be both a Solent and a Thames free port, and what does that mean for Basingstoke as a location that sits between the two, and where will there be opportunities for us to maximise in relation to that. So I think that's the end of my slides. So I will stop sharing, and I think Councillor Raskin would like to say something.
Thank you, Jack. Firstly, is to thank you for your efforts to distill all that information and to provide us with some hope on your commentary on the budget. If I could deal initially, I see Paul Miller's hands up. Do you want to ask a question of Jack before I make some comments?
I think, Leader, you could actually make your comments and I'll follow on, because mine are fairly specific. They aren't questions per se, but it's to amplify and some of the points that Jack has very clearly enunciated. And I'd just like to come back on to him on that one, especially in relation to business and business growth in the future.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. Well, I mean, firstly, the budget, I think my view is that the help provided for the hospitality industry is both welcomed and is probably overdue, if I'm particularly honest. I think the hospitality sector, we all know that pubs, restaurants, wedding venues have all suffered hugely, but the continued change on VAT will allow them to decide whether they reduce prices or they maintain profits, and that might be a way of refilling their coffers to employ new staff. Because one of the things that hasn't really been picked up, and although Jack alluded to the fact that unemployment rates in the borough are at the highest level since the 1990s, is that the wall of unemployment may well still be to be faced as the furlough scheme unwraps. So I was delighted that hospitality, which will obviously need to pick up a number of staff as they open up again, will have the opportunity to do so, both with the grant but also with the long-term benefits of VAT and the benefits in rateable values. First, I'd like to make a point on what else came through that. There wasn't much pickup on how I believe that the free ports will aid us. Basingstoke has always been a manufacturing hub from its time in the 60s, and I think there is a need. I know from speaking to Councillor Harvey in the past that he believes that Basingstoke should be a manufacturing hub, and I think with the opportunity of the free ports, it is a chance for us to be the right place for lots of small manufacturing that might want to export abroad, but obviously also to reduce the supply chain length that we saw at the first start of the pandemic, with PPE being an issue and us needing and requiring medical supplies from far away. I think it would be important that we, all of us, put our shoulders to the wheel to encourage manufacturing, not just of our own companies here in the UK to have a base, but obviously to have inward investment from America, Europe, and the Far East, which I think would be for the long-term benefit of us as a borough. Jack very rightly focused on the demise and the problems within the retail sector. I think it goes without saying that we will know people who have lost their jobs in retail. The fact that we have seen the demise of 3 floors of a huge store like Debenhams does not bode well for that, but I am assured that Festival Place are being flexible on their leases, their rents and their service charges to try and encourage less vacant space, but also to ensure that there's a vibrancy to retail that needs to be back to encourage people to frequent the town centre again and give it that buzz. And so that will be important as we move forward with the new town centre strategy, which in my view would have come anyway. I think COVID has escalated and speeded up the change in the high street. And I know I was with Wayne Hemingway the other day to discuss some of the plans. I mean, obviously I've got my own view on it, but I think the consultation with you as the borough and both as our councillors, but obviously as residents is important. For my own view is that we should be having small, independent, boutique, artisan, unique sorts of shops. Encourage them, not just by our ability to find them the right space, which sometimes is difficult. So we might have to broker space for these individuals or these businesses, or try and lean on people to make sure that the rents are affordable and they are flexible to allow businesses to expand or grow, or just to find out where they want to be. I would like our high street to have that uniqueness that we've all been looking for. Who is not moved by the smell of an artisan baker and the smell of freshly baked bread, or going to a delicatessen and smelling meats and cheeses and things coffee that's freshly ground? You know, we can get these things back, because Basingstoke did have them. And I think it is part of what we need to do is to smarten up the area, not to have myriad of billboards that saying for rent, for sale. But even if they are for rent or for sale, there's got to be a better way than jutting out into the street, to be more discreet, to know it's available, but not to emblazon the fact that it's empty. And I think there is something that all of us, because we care passionately about the town, can add into it. And I see a forest of hands raised because I know this is what you all want to be involved in. I think, as been alluded by Jack, green growth will be important. How can we make people grow a sustainable town, a sustainable borough, but through a greenness? What are the industries of the future? What are the things that are going to change people's lives, and what will the young people who are even younger than Gavin, what are they going to look for in a future borough? What are the millennials, the Gen X, all going to look for when they want to come to a borough? What jobs? We need to make sure that the jobs that we are encouraging are 10, 20 years old. So gaming, film, IT, these are all should be things that we, with our connectivity to the rest of the world, whether that be on a road, whether that be rail, or to, I hope, an expanded Southampton airport, to allow that to feed into our transport world. But also, if we build the right housing, where if we can get live-work environments where people have a cafe downstairs and they can live upstairs and do their work and then come down and do collaborative work, I think that is really important. I think we do not want to build more slums in our town, and PD has flashed a number of them up. But I do think there is a need to repopulate the town with the right accommodation, so it's got a flexibility of work where people don't have to travel, don't have to use a car, they can walk or cycle or just collaboratively work in somebody else's house or flat. So I think there is a lot to be enthusiastic about, but the reality is it won't be done by me as an individual or even you as individuals, but collectively we can all join that journey to make sure that the economic recovery is fully taken up by us as a borough, and that we through the new Economic Recovery Board, on which we will have lots of outside interested parties, but people with real experience helping us shape that recovery for the future. That is my goal. Obviously, you all know that I am only ever a phone call away or an email on this, because it's so important for not just you, but for your residents and the sons and daughters of residents in the borough. So that's just a quick run through from me. I see a forest of hands, Chair, so you're going to be busy.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Just very quickly before I go into call people forward, I just have a couple of questions, and if the committee will bear with me, I just would like to push them in first. Okay, going back through to your presentation, Jack, where you were talking about the impact of the COVID-19 stress. Could you just clarify for me, what do you mean by out of work benefits? Is it just universal credit, or are there other benefits as well?
No, so that will be people claiming universal credit. So it's not a perfect measure, because some people claiming universal credit will actually be working and still access that support. But it's in effect the best proxy that we have for unemployment levels, or at least getting a sense of the impact that we're having at a local level.
Thank you for that. And my second question is that when you were talking about the Apprentice and Skills Hub, and you were saying that that was open, I was a bit confused. Is it open, or are you going to open it in the near future? And if you're going to open it in the near future, can you be a little bit more specific on the timeline?
So the Apprenticeship in Skills Hub as a service is open. That was launched in National Apprenticeship Week in February. So effectively that service is now open for businesses. There's no physical hub for them to go and visit, and
sure,
in current times that probably wouldn't be possible anyway. But that as a service is available. The Youth Hub, which is the tri-borough thing that we're working on with Rushmore and Hart, we are still awaiting confirmation from Department for Work and Pensions around the funding for that. So that's not yet available, and as soon as we have that funding agreement, we'll then have to move into procurement of getting providers to help us deliver that service. So we'll still be a few weeks or potentially months away from delivering that.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'd like to call committee members forward. The first hand I saw was Paul Miller, then just letting everybody know, then Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Gavin James, Councillor Waldridge, Councillor David George, and then Councillor Conesco. That's the order I saw the hands appear. So I'd like to take Paul Miller first, please.
Councillor Laura James has her hand raised as well.
Oh, thank you. I'll just add her on. Okay, so Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much, Chair. Jack, thank you very much for that briefing. I think at this stage of the game, I think it's appropriate, just after the budget, you're able to give us a very clear view of our perception of how the borough is faring. I want to move on to two things. You mentioned we weren't sure, and I don't think we are sure about what model of workplace is going to be in the future. Now, I happen to have, when I retired, I was working at Kinetic. Now, Kinetic being the organization that it is, we were doing both availability of working from home and hybrid meetings 15 years ago. So, it was necessity for various reasons because we were working internationally as well as in the UK. And there were times when it was far quicker just to get online, but the broadband availability at that time was very iffy. Now, that's the reason I'm just mentioning this, because it's connected to improving air quality. It's connected to the green agenda, but it's a part of the infrastructure that is absolutely essential if we're going to get into the kind of development and industries that was mentioned by the leader during his observations a few minutes ago. Now, I'm lucky enough to be sitting on a Virgin network in Chinham, because Virgin is cable to the house, and it has an excellent, I won't go into the internal Wi-Fi, but I have a very good internal Wi-Fi system as well, which is cheaply available commercially. But that's how I think the future is going to work. The trouble is that there are areas of this borough that are very poorly served with broadband, even in 2021. Yes, we can talk about the town itself, but there are many places of workplaces that are important in the light industrial area outside. We encourage the rural economy to come up. The small niche businesses that we're talking about earlier on, they need as much good broadband connectivity than anybody else.
I'm sorry, Councillor. Is there a question coming, please?
No, I said before, not necessarily questions, but these are comments on what Jack's presentation was all about, because I think there are things that we can actually investigate further, probably the most appropriate committee. But I think if you don't have the right infrastructure, you're not going to get some of the businesses to work properly. This is my point on all this, and this is why I'm reinforcing what Jack is saying. And it really does come along to the green infrastructure whole concept that we're trying to develop within the borough, because you're reducing traffic, you're reducing all kinds of issues related to the green environment, air quality for one thing. The trouble I've got with 5G, it's all very good, it's an emerging technology, but we've all got to change our phones for one thing. It means individuals have to change their own technology. Improved broadband, you don't need to. We've all got the connectivity already. So if there's an order of priority, the priority would be for a business to have broadband connectivity. Some might, if they're startups, might go straight to 5G. There's no 5G around Basingstoke. if you look at the pattern of 5G, it's all in the big urban, it's the old M1 corridor. That's where the 5G elements are being put into. It's not questions, Chair. I don't make no apologies for that, but I think it's raising the visibility of the broadband infrastructure. Without infrastructure, none of this, well, little of this is going to happen. And the sooner we get it in, the better. And my recommendation would be the council, Basingstoke Borough Council, could get into bed with some of the big infrastructure providers to maybe facilitate or to encourage them to come in and look and see what the possibilities are of them providing that infrastructure for us.
Thank you, Councillor
Chairman.
Okay, moving on to Councillor Harvey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on Ken's point about manufacturing, he's right, and he's right in terms of banging on about this for years, because it's been key to us to have that mixed economy. And I guess my point is, if we are now looking at a really or an inward investment strategy, perhaps looking closely at what the balance should be or maintained in the local economy, then how we organise a serious inward investment strategy for the borough, such that we are providing and fostering the right opportunities in the right places for businesses to come in, who could be anchor businesses that we are looking for to then support ancillary economies, to support local jobs and local skills development. All of that fits that growth agenda. And if it is linked to your green agenda, if it is linked to encouraging them being as green businesses, all the better. So all of that joins up quite nicely. I am really worried about the youth unemployment rate. I'm sure we all are. You look at those figures and you see, I think, really a ticking time bomb that we have got to get to grips with. And it's not going to be easy, and I don't think it's going to be a one-size-fits-all answer. But I do think it needs to be a priority of the action plan that Jack and officers are looking at, is to how do we tackle that scale of youth unemployment so that we do not have it embedded in generations to come. We break it now. We get them back into work. We have the opportunities for skills and learning, for return to learn, bearing in mind the amount of people as well who have dropped out of learning. It isn't just about the jobs and skills. I think there will be quite a lot of people who will have started to learn in different environments that COVID has resulted in them dropping out. And so providing them the opportunity to go back into learning, to complete their skills and training, is also key. I'd also like to raise the point about the town centre. I am concerned about the over provision of residential development in the town centre, and I think we are going to disagree on this one. It might be to a degree, it might not necessarily be a complete disagreement, but I do feel strongly that if we over-egg residential development in the town centre, we will defeat the object of having the town centre as what we want it to be, which is an economic driver in the first place. Not so much a place for people simply to live, but what we really, really want is those places that we currently have as vacancies and those areas that we want to see investment in generate economic growth, not just be occupying as residential places. And I think that's a real difficult one to balance, but I come down on the economic side rather than the residential side, largely because of the debate that we're having. So over densification of the town centre, which is picked up in the paper after this, is, I think, controversial. And finally, I just want to raise the point about business certainty. I get the point that there's been a lot of money pushed out, but a lot of businesses haven't had access to that money because they haven't fitted the criteria, or because of various reasons they haven't qualified. An awful lot of businesses that are on the edge of going under don't qualify because they can't prove themselves in a way that they're then able to access the funds because they're not seen as being viable or sustainable. And in that sense, there are an awful lot of businesses that need the certainty of some good planning, some good economic strategy planning, just to help them through. So I would like to see us encourage those new ways of working. I'd like us to embrace what we can do to support employers in their new ways of working. We have one hell of an asset base in this town as a borough. We really do have an asset base, and we own an awful lot of real estate. And our ability to support those employers thinking differently about how they use office buildings, how they work from home, and the services that could be provided to support people working at home, that work-life balance argument, I just think are really important and kind of run through what you're saying, Jack, at the end there with your priorities. So I just think those areas are really worth investing some time and effort getting right and focus right so that we can get the right outcome at the end, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Okay.
Chair, can I come back on Councillor Harvey's point? I'm encouraging live-work environments. So I wasn't talking about a complete repopulation of the town. I'm trying to say that we should have flexible working that suits the needs of a changing employment space. That's all I'm trying to say, Paul. And I think there is a point to try and move that forward. We don't really have much live work in the town, and I think there is a need for it now, but also an opportunity and a time for it.
Thank you, Rita.
Chair, if I can quickly say to Ken, I understand what you're saying. I just think there's a careful balance between the concept of what the town centre can offer as a place to live, where you want all of the elements that go with that, as much as a place to work. And there are so many variations of what you're saying. Yeah, pick the conversation up with you offline as to what we both mean by live work.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Gavin James, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think just first of all, in case there's any investors or businesses watching this webcast, the leader misspoke. We have never built slums in Basingstoke. We haven't got any slums in Basingstoke. We are the economic heart of Hampshire. We are the central southern powerhouse for the economy, a great place to live, a great place to work, and a great place to come. There are no slums in Basingstoke. There are pockets of regeneration opportunities that we are taking up right now, regardless who's in control, but there are no slums. Just make that absolutely clear to anyone outside. We all know that, but in case someone was watching and misheard the leader. Moving on to the town centre, I was a little bit concerned when we talk about the important stepping stones, because we're having a consultation. So I just thought I'd quickly remind people the Central Area Action Plan, October 2003, that was seen as a significant stepping stone, public consultation, and then we had some consultants come in as well. It didn't really achieve much, and by the time we got to 2006, we'd gone over to the I think it was a central area vision where we had consultants in, etc. By the time we got to 2007, it was a vision for central Basingstoke. Then it became the town centre area vision. By 2012, it hadn't really taken off, and we had the Porters High Street review, £100,000 spent on improving the look of the top of the town. That didn't particularly work very well. So by 2014, we had the top of town concept master plan launched with Urban Initiative Studios. It's 2014, 7 years old now. It's really worth going through that document, and you'll be amazed how much hasn't happened. In fact, none of it has. And here we are 7 years later talking about we're going to have a new vision. And I just think it's really important. We at some point, we have to have some actions. I know Councillor Cubitt's very vocal on perhaps being bigger and bolder with these actions, but I think we seem to have been flapping around with this issue. If we'd spent the money on something other than consultants, if consultants opened shops, the top of town would be packed. It'd be brilliant. So I just think we need to step back from saying this is a huge step. It hopefully it is, but the huge step is the action, the outflow, the something that comes out of it. Because so far, we've even had the bid for the last 4 years, which has now folded, and even that didn't really make any difference to the top of town. So we've tried a lot of things. This just sounds like another press release, and I hope it turns to action this time, because the top of town just keeps dying. And it's not consultations that seem to work, or consultants that seem to make a difference. So hopefully this time's different. Hopefully Jack can assure me there's a different concept this time. And
Councillor James, you seem to have frozen.
I was talking about good broadband.
Okay, certainly. Okay, we'll come back to Councillor James. Okay. Councillor Waldridge, please.
Thank you, Chair. Right, the point I'd like to make, I'd like to build on what Paul said actually about my real concerns about the 7.8% of young people who are currently sort of unemployed. I have real concerns that they are going to slip through the net, and the longer this goes on, and the more ingrained they are in not working, the more that's going to affect their mental health, their self-esteem, and all of that. And I think there's some really good stuff that you've put out tonight, but I don't see anything really dealing with the softer skills that these young people are going to need to have, and and all the support they're going to need when they've been unemployed for a long time to get them back in a state where they are ready to work. So I'd like your thoughts on that, please. Also, linked to that is adults who you know, may have worked in, for example, retail for a long time. They're now sort of, you know, lost their jobs, but that's what they do. That's all they know. I've mentioned at this committee before about, you know, adult education and what proactive steps we're taking to link in with the colleges to, you know, provide courses to get them skilled in other areas. And I'd like a little bit more on that, your thoughts on that and how we're going to achieve that as well, please. You know, I think this is very good in that it's geared towards apprenticeships, but not all young people are of that sort of level to be able to go into an apprenticeship and do that sort of studying and combine with work. A lot of young people, and there'll be more as this goes on, who have left school without the qualifications that they should have got or could have got, whose self-esteem quickly goes. And that's what I'm really, really concerned about for the future. How are we going to tackle that? Because it's a ticking time bomb, as Paul has said, and we need to act now. And it's not just little steps. We need to take massive steps and have a real strategy about how we stop our young people in the future becoming, you know, the lost generation, really. So that's my thoughts on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waldridge. Do you want to come back, Jack?
Yeah. So if I take those points in order, I think the point raised around it's not just about sort of facilitating young people to access and understand what opportunities are available, but actually helping them with the softer skills that they're going to need to develop themselves to be employable, to be ready for employment, essentially. That is going to be a critical part of the Youth Hub. And I didn't, in the sort of a brief presentation I gave earlier, maybe didn't fully explain how that will operate, but that will be a critical part about what the service is there to provide. It's not just about a sort of finding out where job opportunities are. It's actually going to provide services around CV writing, interview skills, having the confidence to move to get back into the employment market or for the first time, and also working with partners to help them. So people like potentially like Anvil Arts or Proteus or other organisations across the borough, in terms of those sort of confidence and employability workshops that we will look to deliver. So I think that is one element that we definitely want to make sure is a key part of the Youth Hub. On the sort of recognising that apprenticeships is not the only route, I completely agree. And I think what has been announced through the budget, but also in work through the plan for jobs last summer, is recognition that there are other routes for young people to go through, and obviously the Kickstart scheme is one of those routes, and that really is aimed at people who potentially have never had an opportunity to work before. And as an organisation, we are working through the County Council to as our gateway partner to offer 8 placements in the organisation as to Kickstartees, whatever they may be called. And we're obviously working with businesses across the borough to try and promote that and get as many taking on young people as possible, because it is that platform to allow them to start on their journey and give them that 6 months of experience, paid experience, that will enable them to have the confidence and the skills and the experience to fall back on and to move on to their next opportunity, which might then be a level 1 or level 2 apprenticeship, or it might be something else. And I think on the retraining side, at a national level, that's obviously been very much recognised, and the National Skills Fund will be critical in helping people to do that retraining and accessing support that they might not have had before or had the resources to access before, and particularly for those who, as you say, are moving out of one employment area which they might have been in for a sustained period, that enabling them to actually have the funding behind them to go and do a course that will open up opportunities in a completely different area. We'll be looking closely at what the exact offer is there from government and making sure that our residents are accessing that as quickly as possible. So,
thank you, Jack. Okay, Councillor Wood.
Can I just come back in on one point? there.
Yeah, sure.
I appreciate your clarification on a lot of that. There was one. There's just what I'm really getting at though. That is that there's a group of people who won't be able, you need to read it. I need to be reached out to really, who won't come to the things like the Anvil because they haven't got the esteem to even go into town and do that. After a certain period, young people will get to that point where that's too much for them. So is there any outreach work planned to reach out to these young people? Because that's what I'm really concerned about, is that those people who will get, because I used to work for Connections and there are a certain amount of people, the young people, and in times of recession, this is when they, it really takes hold, where there is no opportunity for them, and you have to reach out to them where they are to get them to engage really. So it's that those young people. I appreciate what you've said about the other young people and the hub. Now you've clarified it. I'm pleased with that, but it's these are the young people I also am concerned about. So I'd like you to think a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, again, something I'd like to say about the Youth Hub is in terms of outreach, although it is most likely, should the funding become available from DWP, most likely to have a town centre base, because that seems the most practical area to have it. Some of the work that we've built into the programme is around taking the advisors who work on the Youth Hub and going around community centres across the borough, so that there will be opportunities for outreach work. And it's not just about a case of expecting everyone to come to the service itself, and we'll try as much as we can to take the service out to people.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got Councillor Gavin James back with us. I would just like to give you the opportunity, Gavin, to finish off your speech. Do you have any questions, comments, or were you quite happy with what you said?
Well, I don't know when you lost me, Chairman, so it's very difficult to say. I mean, if I disappeared after good evening, then I've got some more to say. But I'm guessing I as long as I covered I corrected the leader's comment, and I mentioned that we've done a few town centre studies before, so let's not hold our breath on this one. Then I've got everything, and I'm happy, and I'll sit down quietly. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor James. Okay, Councillor George, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jack, for a very interesting presentation. Look, I'm particularly welcome a lot of the things going on here, particularly the apprenticeships and skills has been mentioned, the Youth Hub and the Borough Basket. They all seem very, very positive things to do. And, I welcome, I think I heard a commitment there that these things will continue in the future and not just sort of fall by the wayside once COVID's out of the way. And I'd really welcome that. There's some very good stuff in there. I was particularly pleased, as I say, about the Borough Basket. And I think when this came before the committee last year, there was, I think, a general consensus. There wasn't a lot of focus, should we say, on the rural economy. I think that was a general consensus at that time. And it's great, really, to see that people in Whitchurch and Overturn and what have you are contributing to that. So I'd really like to put that. But on that particular theme, I think a few things are happening here. I think one of the things that COVID has done, and it helps us, I think, in a number of areas, is clearly on the green thing. It means there's far less people getting on airplanes and going abroad, and I don't see that, finishing straight away. It can be in a few years, I think, before that'll change. That will have an effect on the fact that clearly people are going to be looking to stay in the UK for their vacations and not go abroad, and we do have some wonderful parts of this borough where clearly we could help to develop the rural economy and tourism. Simple startups like increased bed and breakfast and things like that, maybe areas that we certainly could look at. And we've got some lovely areas with beautiful footpaths and everything else, and we really ought to try and perhaps have a little bit of a strategy, I think, for that going forward. It's an area of the economy which I don't think we have focused on very much. We've got the Silk Mill, Bombay Sapphire, places like that, which are focal points which we can build on. But we've got some wonderful towns, lovely towns, Highclere, Kingsclere, all these places which are really quite underdeveloped. And on that point, I think I certainly think Councillor James mentioned the town centre strategy. Well, coming from a town, another town in Basingstoke and Dean, I must admit it's a bit, we need to call these things Basingstoke Town, not the town centre, because there are other towns there. I've mentioned that before, but I have been talking to the portfolio holders and Mark and John on that, and I have managed, I think, to get a commitment that we will start looking at some of these more regional centres as well as the town centre. And I think, I've got to thank Daniel Garnier. I know he can see opportunities and prospects in doing that and has been helping us, but I would really welcome encouragement there, because I think Ken's mentioned artisan shops and nice places and all these lovely places, but if we wanted to put those, it'd be great to have more like that out in places like Whitchurch, where we are getting people to come in, see the silk mill and get them to spend money out there and come and stay. I think this whole area, I think I would really welcome a little bit more focused on, actually. So I think that's probably all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor George. Okay, Councillor Konesko, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll begin just by echoing the points that a couple of other councillors have raised about the youth skills and challenges with youth opportunities, because I think that is hugely important, and it's reassuring to see that is being addressed in the plan. So thank you for that. I've got a couple of questions for Jack and a couple of questions for the leader, if I may, Chair. So just starting off with Jack. On page 22 of our packs, page 6 of 7 of your report, just above the section 4 next steps, you talk about the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme. So the idea here is to do energy saving measures for low income households living in inefficient homes. And that work's got to be completed by September, so in 6 months' time. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about that. So what's happening there? How are we identifying properties, and how are we going to get everything done in 6 months? Given that the overall, the central government Green Home Grant Scheme has been criticised for being very slow in terms of its delivery. And the second point, I guess, is probably more of a point than a question. But I noticed in the budget yesterday that there were several pots that were announced for more community involvement in local sporting facilities, and it was just to see whether that's something that you guys were going to look at, because potentially we've got a football club that is looking for a new home. We've got an ice rink whose main facilities are perhaps nearing the end of their life. So is there an opportunity potentially for us to use some of that money to help our local sporting facilities that are struggling at the moment?
If I take the second point first, yes, looking across all the funds that have been made available through the budget will be priority for an immediate priority for the next few weeks, and looking at where there are opportunities to align with the work that the council is already doing will be high up on the agenda. I would just temper that with the fact that alongside the sort of prospectuses that the government published yesterday on the Levelling Up Fund, it also published a sort of categorisation of need across local authority levels, and there's a clear indication that the focus of that fund, and therefore the focus of the money, will be given dependent on sort of how they see deprivation across local authority levels, and they're divided into 3 categories, with us being in the sort of lowest, i.e. I would say the most difficult to access that funding. So we're going to really need to build a significant business case, I think, if we're going to achieve what we want through all of those funding pots. But that's not to say that it's of course still going to be worth exploring, and there will be still funding available to councils who are in that level 3 as they've identified. If I may, on the clean growth housing project that you specifically talked about, I'd be more than happy to come back with further details with my colleague from the climate change team to provide a bit more detail about that, because I don't have that to hand at the moment, exactly how that operates.
That'd be brilliant. Thank you, Chair. And may I ask a couple of questions of the leader, Chair?
Certainly, ask away.
Thank you. So Leader, just a couple of things. One, we've spoken already about the struggle that the retail sector's having and how COVID's accelerated the decline. We've obviously got a leisure park planned, which at the moment has a significant retail element to it, and is presumably how part of the leisure activity is going to be funded. How does what's happened recently in terms of the pandemic and its impact on retail affect that? And I'm just sort of conscious here that I remember back to the financial crisis, whatever, 14 years ago now, where a lot of the developers kept insisting throughout the crisis that regeneration schemes that were on the drawing board would definitely continue. And sure enough, there were questions about their viability from councils, from the public, and sort of sure enough, one by one, they were all subsequently dropped or significantly downscaled. So it'd be really helpful to get an update on where you think we are with the leisure park and the leisure park viability. And then the second question was to do with, you mentioned the Economic Recovery Board. When we discussed this back in September, and this is 6 months ago, which is a world away given everything that's happened since then. So my memory may be failing me, but I think we did talk about having some local authority involvement as well in that recovery board. And it was just to see whether that was indeed happening.
Thank you, Councillor Konecko. First things first, we have a development agreement in place. But if you're asking me confidentially and in private as an individual, do I think retail is a complete winner out there? Well, the answer is no, if I'm honest. We were talking about this between us, but I do think the leisure park is vital to what we provide for our residents. So it's me. So I would like to see much more experiences out there. Now, I can't say this is what will come forward, because obviously New River Retail might have a view, and I don't want to prejudice what they are saying. But I would like to see things that are much more artisan. Would I like to see a cookery school out there? Perhaps. Would I like to see a arts hub where people would go painting and ceramics, and would we be able to push that out to people who are in schools or young and skilled up? I think there's a possibility. Should we have framers out there? Should any retail be supportive of that? Like a framers, or somewhere where you can buy something to go along with your ceramics, or those sort of stores that would support that. Now, if that's what went out there, would I be supportive of it? Well, yes, I would. But of course, there is a development agreement in place at the moment, so I certainly won't be going against that at the current time until we understand exactly where New River Retail are on it. But of course, funding is difficult for them, as it's difficult for lots of businesses. And will that change in the future? Well, I have to say probably that they will be changing their view as to what could go out there. Now, I'm not going to make any comments as to whether they will do that or not, or when that would be. But my hope is that we are in a new world, and we need to make sure that we give our residents the best opportunity to access things that they want to enjoy. And there are other benefits to that. Our hotels aren't always going to be full with business men and women who are staying 2 or 3 nights. But if we gave people the right experiences at places like the leisure park, for example, would they be at a cookery school for 2 or 3 days? Would it be the right place to put a James Martin or a Raymond Blanc or somebody else who might inspire people to come in, learn? We all understand that we're going to have to be healthier. Wouldn't it be great to have somewhere where on our doorstep they talk us about healthy cooking, making a difference, cooking on a budget? We all know that that's what we should be doing. We know there's a well-being and an obesity crisis. Wouldn't it be great to find some of the solutions for that within our own borough? The world is different. Sorry, Andy, I didn't write your second question down. I've written that first one, such a tirade from me there.
Thank you. The second question was about the Economic Recovery Board.
Okay.
Last time round, when this paper was first put to the committee back in the autumn, we talked about the importance of having a good mix of public and private sector individuals on it.
Well, just to reassure you, that was very much part of a discussion I had with Daniel, Jack and Ian Bold today, was to make sure that we had a diversity of people, educationalists, people who could do with skills and things. So a representative of Further Education College, but people who would be able to help us in that manufacturing piece, as I alluded to, people who are connected to the free ports and an understanding of how the Basingstoke could once again be an export hub, but also to give us a range of views, not just my Tory right-wing view, but that of trade unionists, because we need to make this tent big. We need to understand what workforces need. We need to understand where people will be coming from as we upskill them or reskill them in a changed employment environment. And I think there are wonderful opportunities. We have got a great pool of people to work with and work through to get their best ideas as to what should happen. And that will include industrialists, but it will include people who genuinely have a feel for the borough. So the net will not just be borough-wide, but it will be more regional, because we need to make sure that things like universities, although we don't have one ourselves, we make sure that their feed-in directs some of our youth to certain employment structures, to make sure that when people come back from being educated somewhere else, they come back with the skills, and we are able to provide them with the jobs and opportunities that they want coming back to their hometown or their home borough. So yes, it will be a widely spread net. We are formulating it, and I know Jack might want to say something that how quickly those invitations to join us are going out. Jack, do you want to say something on that invitation piece?
Yeah, just that, as Councillor Raskin said, we've identified a wide range of participants that we hope to be involved in the Recovery Board. Of course, we are asking them to give up their time and their capacity to involve themselves in something that's wider than just the needs of their business. So there's no guarantee that we will get every representative that we hope to, but invites will be going out very soon, probably within the next week, and we hope to set up the first meeting not long after, once we have a good understanding of who will be available. So we can provide a further update, certainly to EPH, at the next time that we come back.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
Right, okay, I've got Councillor Laura James, please, who's been waiting very patiently. Thank you very much. Okay, and then I've got Councillor Cubitt.
Can I also echo I was going to do it before Gavin mentioned it about our leader and the comments he said about building slums. I think it's a really dangerous thing to do, and it worries me greatly that we have a leader that's talking down the town. When you were referring to permitted development is a government policy, and we need to look at that. And we're also really concerned about all of us in this committee and across the town. But I don't think it's going to help if we start to talk about slums. And at the same time, I also want to pick up on some points that you've just raised. I cannot help myself after the work that we've just done on this task and finish group, really. We have a significant unemployment issue in the town, and it's growing. And you're talking on our leisure park of building a Raymond Blanc, cookery school, and having people come for 2 days. I mean, we've heard this before already from New River as one of their issues. You also talked about the issue of having pottery classes, and then you might be able to buy something to go in the pottery that you've made. Is it that you're going to make a sort of casserole dish and you can go off to the leisure park and buy your meat or whatever to go into that pottery. I just beggars belief, really. But what I wanted to talk about was also the significant amount of unemployment we've got, and the cumulative effect of that unemployment in relation to health. And obviously, we haven't seen evictions yet, but they are coming, and they are going to be significant. And we really need to think about that. There's a hold on all of that. And I really think, as part of this economic strategy, we really have to have a handle on what that's going to look like. Because I think that when that starts to happen, it is going to be such a significant issue. And how many of those unemployed people at the moment will we see losing their homes or threat of losing their homes. So I think that's what we need to consider. But I really would like us to do a really much more detailed piece of work around those people who are unemployed, and the disparity in relation to women as well. We talk about young people, also women that are the higher percentage of women that are unemployed. And we don't talk about people with disabilities, and I think that that's something that we need to consider around economic issues. We never talk about people with disabilities, really, and I really think we need to have a focus on that. And the other thing is, I'd like to see, in the future, some really, and you're talking about it, some really detailed actions in relation to the themes coming forward, so we can measure the success of this piece of work. And I thank you, Jack, for the work you're doing, and I look forward to those actions. Thank you.
Can I quickly answer Councillor Laura James? Firstly, I apologise for not picking up on that disabilities piece. I think you're absolutely right to flag it to the administration and to the economic recovery team, because we all know that people with disabilities, firstly, it's difficult for them to access some employment opportunities, and it may well be even more so when the pool of individuals is bigger because of unemployment. So I take that on board, and I'm happy to understand that. You were at council last week. I think I praised Councillor Kim Taylor for her work on evictions and universal credit. Things that she's brought to my attention, but I have also relayed to others. Sorry, Laura.
Sorry, Laura, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have an opportunity at full council to correct you, but it was actually Caroline Wardridge that brought those things to your attention.
I'm sorry, I got an email from Kim Taylor, so I'm absolutely convinced it was. No, I know I got an email, so I know that was the case. It doesn't matter anyway. That the people, whoever they are, there's enough. There isn't enough praise in me to say to Caroline, and who I spoke to at Morrison's, so I know how passionate she feels about housing and everything else. I mean, people do, well, some people find me approachable, that they can say things to me, and I will highlight them when I'm in conversations with MPs. So I just wanted to relay that. My point about the leisure wasn't that, it was to show that there could be different things there from retail. I wasn't saying that's what it's got to be, but I am saying that when retail is suffering, maybe we need to think differently. And I was just trying to float out an idea that might be the right thing. Now, it may well be that arts will go out there, or dance, or studios, or whatever. But the reality is, it will have to be different from what was originally envisaged at the retail park, because life has changed. And I totally accept that my view of the world is not your view, but we will get somewhere in between to work for our residents. And I will listen to any suggestion from anybody to get our residents the facilities that they need, and for those who are less well off, an ability to access those facilities, at a price they can afford at a time and an opportunity that is given to them. So I am flexible. I've not been wealthy all my life. I've been poor. So I know how life is for people who struggle. And you know as well as I do. I brought up 2 kids of my own because my first wife died. So I've done it all, right, the hard way and the proper way. But I remember those days because that colours what I think about people. I am generous in my ear, and I will do everything I can to improve people's lives.
Thank you, Leader. Okay, just moving on now to finally, Honourable Cubitt, please. Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, firstly, a thank you to Jack and his team for everything. 2 questions. We're talking about trying to help facilitate our economy post-COVID. And I just wondered whether you could talk us through whether there is going to be any flexibility with regards to business rates. That's my first question. And my second question relates to that to a degree, which is that we as a town and a borough have been really at the forefront of engineering for our history. And in fact, that's why we are who we are, and we're the 3rd largest town in Hampshire. And engineering, as I'm sure everyone's aware, is really at the forefront of the 4th industrial age. And so, and it chimes with a lot of other members' views about manufacturing. And what concerns me about the Economic Recovery Group, and I'd actually like to make a public request to sit on that group if possible. But the problem with the Economic Recovery Group is if it involves other towns, is that I'm concerned that they get divvied out, and we've been divvied out the warehouses. That's the way the LEPs seem to work. And we as members aren't privy to the conversations that happen at the LEP. And if we're going to be governed by kind of a group of senior statesmen who we don't know who they are, we don't know what their background is, we don't know what their drivers are, but they've decided that Basingstoke is going to be a big warehouse town, then we need to know about it. But more importantly, I really believe that as a borough, and being the 3rd largest town in Hampshire, and having had an amazing history of engineering and having a wonderful pool, talent of people here, we should be really focusing on that and how that can play with the business rates. Thank you.
Jack, do you want to come back in?
Yep. So in terms of business rates, at the budget announced yesterday, there is the business rates relief for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses of 100% relief up until the end of June, and then 66% relief from July through to the end of March next year. So there will be that support for those particular businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors. There are certain caps depending on the size of the business, but largely enough, pretty much most businesses will receive in those industries will receive rate relief. On a wider level, for businesses outside of those sectors, business rates policy is still set by government, and there's been a lot of work or talk, I should say, about the future of business rates, and we're still awaiting further details about how the system will be reformed in its entirety, and I think that work has been continually delayed as obviously there have been other priorities over the past 12 months. But when there is the review of the rates system, there will be an opportunity for us to voice how we would like to see that operate to help local economies thrive. And certainly there is consideration about how we incentivize the rate system so that it does help to support local economies. So that's the first point. I think on the Economic Recovery Board, when Councillor Raskin talked about regional perspective, I think what he was talking about was businesses who are going to be involved in that will be from the Basingstoke community, but have a wider interest in the area as well, and will have partners involved, such as the Enterprise M3 LEP and the Chambers of Commerce, etc., and the County Council, another example, who not only consider Basingstoke, but think about the wider landscape as well, and will be able to bring other perspectives. I don't think it's not a case that that board will be making any sort of decisions that will circumvent any other routes that would happen. It's there as essentially a sounding board and a challenging board, and an area where we can take ideas to and hear directly from those who are directly engaged in our key sectors, our priority sectors, the sectors that have been affected by COVID, and those that have that wider regional perspective to help us shape our policy and think about our delivery of work under the economic recovery framework going forward. So it's certainly not a case of looking to circumvent any kind of proper governance. And I mean, just on the engineering point, it's worth reminding that one of our priority sectors that we identified in our economic growth strategy in March 2019 was advanced manufacturing and engineering. And we still see those 4 priority sectors that we had identified in the growth strategy, of which one of those is advanced manufacturing and engineering, as being vital to the future prosperity of Basingstoke and Deane. So within the recovery framework, we haven't really touched on it today, but there is a theme around sector support, and that will be one of the 4 sectors that we'll be focused on.
Okay, Ms. Chairman, can I just say one thing? Thank you very much, Jack. I think in terms of where we're situated, in terms of Brexit, in terms of COVID, in terms of the history of our wonderful town, which I love with all my passion, as I'm sure all the other members do, I would really love to hear the administration and the officers really plug and push for manufacturing at the top of the tree going forward. So I'm glad it's part of, but I would love to hear it being sung from a higher tree and louder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cubitt. Okay, are there any more comments, questions on this this subject before I start summing up? Okay, no. Okay, right. So I've been frantically trying to scribble down some notes. Okay, to sum up, but basically, I think we discussed the importance of infrastructure, especially high quality high quality cheap broadband. Okay, I think there was general consensus across the committee that we had concerns about youth and unemployment. Okay, and health issues all wrapped up in there. Okay, we also had interest in youth outreach work. Okay, for the apprenticeship and skills hub. Okay, and I can't read the rest of that note. Another was I'm just trying to think here. Get help on the leisure park. Okay, where the leader talked about potentially, wanting experiences there as well as associated retail. Okay, there was looking or exploring further in the national budget. Okay, on the pots of money that could possibly help our sports companies, especially the football and ice that were mentioned. And then we discussed the Economic Recovery Board. Okay, how will it be made up? Okay, potential looking at the public and private diversity ratio, and what skills could be provided. There was a discussion on the cumulative effect of unemployment on health and potentially eviction or threat of loss of homes. Okay, there was also a discussion on economic issues regarding the effects on women and the disabled, and a request for detailed action points needed, and that was looked forward to. There was then a discussion on flexibility of business rates and in ongoing sectors. There was regarding business rate reductions, there was a 100% reduction to the end of June, and then it was falling to 60% to the end of, was that March, Jack?
Yeah, 66% through to March.
Beg your pardon. Okay, through to March, and then we're still awaiting a decision on how business rate system is going to be overhauled, and we'll be having feedback into that. Okay, and then there was more further discussion on the ERB, that will be used as a sounding board, and it won't be making decisions outside of our current processes, so it won't be circumventing any processes. And then finally, there was a sector, a discussion on specific sectors, in primarily advanced engineering, okay, but pushing for manufacturing, but also the other three remaining sectors, okay, in the plan. Does everybody think that that kind of covers that? Leader, I see you've got your hand up.
I haven't, and just further to Councillor Laura James's point, I wonder if Jack could provide us in the future with some figures on disability within the borough and the numbers of unemployed, because if we know what we're starting with, then we know where we can help and where we can be beneficial to those who perhaps lose their jobs and finding it more difficult to get back on the ladder, not just through their disabilities, but their access to the right jobs.
Thank you, Leader. I think it would also be worthwhile splitting it down between gender as well. Okay, if just so that we actually can see where we are. Okay, does anybody else feel that I've missed something in the summing up? No? Okay, right. Thank you very much. What we'll do is we'll move on to the next subject then, please. So this is the local plan update, the issues and options consultation outcome. Okay, so just while we have everybody here, is everybody here, Sadie?
Yes, everyone's present.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I was a little disturbed to receive a phone call this evening from Councillor Cubitt, and I would like her to make a provisional point or preliminary point in regarding of the quotes and her suggestion for further appendices. Councillor Cubitt.
Right. Hi, good evening, everybody. Just if it's going to happen before the report, I had a conversation with our officers, and I had a conversation with the cabinet member, and I had a conversation with the chairman today. And whilst I think the consultation report was the update, the actual consultation document was really good and teased out lots of key issues. I am concerned about the summing up, and particularly I'm concerned about how we haven't delineated the responses in regards to the categories, and I'm concerned that the democratic voice has been, to a degree, not purposefully, but just by the way it's been designed, has been marginalized. So my requests before we go into the document is to keep it in draft. I would like the full submissions attached in Appendix 2. I might have misunderstood the document because I read it that there were 1,700 consultees, but on reflection, when I've reevaluated and reappraised the kind of reference points in Appendix 1, I think it's considerably less than 1,700, and actually the 1,700 actually relates to individual answers to individual questions. So I'd like a clarification from that from the officers. If indeed, as I now believe, having reread the document, that there was significantly lower numbers of respondees than 1,700, then I don't think my request is too onerous. I'd like the full submissions in Appendix 2 to be grouped by industry category so that we know that the responses from the builders stroke construction lobby group is in one section, and then we have the parish council in another section, and then we have members in another section, so that we can qualify the comments, because ultimately as members we are elected by a sizable amount of residents. We represent the community, and this is our document for our people and for our town, and I don't think we should be giving equal weight to views from the construction industry in terms of NDSS standards and or not taking on board noise requests, etc., which are some of my big issues with regards to new buildings. Secondly, if we could keep it in draft, I'd like the executive summary to be slightly amended in order to again preface positions in terms of which category they represent, so that it's a more reflective document that represents the inherent conflict that exists within the planning system. And finally, what triggered a lot of this for me personally was I spent an enormous time, like I'm sure many of you did, working on my submissions, and the editorial the editorial decisions that have been taken on Appendix 1 disturbed me, I'm afraid, and they jarred. And then I looked at my original submissions, and they don't reflect what I believe I said. And I then communicated with various parish councils today, and I can cite examples when we get further into the document of this problem that I'm referring to. So historically, with statutory consultations, we haven't been paraphrased, we've been quoted in a landscape document, and it's the paraphrasing that I have issue with. I don't know whether you want me to cite the examples now or to leave it, Mr. Chairman, to later on in the meeting.
I would like you to give just a couple of examples now, okay, so that what can happen is that this can be taken away, okay, and worked on.
Okay, cool. So there's a sizable amount of examples, but I will. Unfortunately, I'm in a room where my yellow highlighter is not as effective as it was in another room.
Okay, then.
So hang on a second. So I'll give you a classic example. So on page 49, this is just an example, and then I'm going to give you another example in a second. On page 49, section 5.3.4, water efficiency. I don't know whether you've all got the original consultation document as well. It says, Councillor Cubitt and Solve is a group to the east of Basingstoke, which is Save Our Loddon Valley Environment, oppose the use of water efficiency standards, while 3 respondents commented it should be flexible enough to accommodate future national changes. And my actual comment was, literally because I've printed it all off, section 5.3.4, I am strongly against the council imposing further water rationing per person to 110 litres per person per day. Our efficiency standard should be 125 litres per person per day and no less. However, grey water harvesting, recycling should be designed into all new developments throughout the borough. So that's just a classic example of an unfortunate lifting and paraphrasing, which I don't believe is reflective. And I'm afraid, having gone through with a fine-tooth comb various other comments, there's another one to do with the top of town, and I say that I'm prepared to consider sheltered. We need to be innovative. So I say the world of retail has probably changed forever. First and foremost, we need to help protect Festival Place. We need to be innovative with regards to the rest of the town centre. Mixed residential at the top of town with a large amount of sheltered housing for the elderly, and a reconfiguration and redesign of the link between top of town and St Michael's and the Great Wall of Basingstoke would make a huge difference to the whole feel of the town. I think it would be great to have a giant scale mural and that kind of stuff, and I'm just quoted in tandem with a builder saying that I'm quite happy for housing to replace the top of town. So those are kind of examples. There's one other example I want to use, because it's not just me, is in relation to a parish council, and it is in relation to 7H 7 EFGHIJ. Okay. Right, just here on page 65. Okay, this is really extraordinary. So I've got a parish council submission here, and it says option 3, continuing local plan approach but increasing proportion of development at larger and more sustainable towns. And it says that Maple Durwell and Upnakeley Parish Council and Newnham support increasing development in more sustainable towns and villages. And yet actually the submission from the parish council says that smaller settlements attract considerable amounts of new small scale, exceed the additional housing targets, they're detrimental, they alter the character of these unique places. If housing targets are added, they should only be for less than 5 houses, they should never be over dominant. So it's about nuance and interpretation, and I'm very fearful of what has happened despite the very good work that has been done. I'm afraid I think there's more work to be done.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cubitt. What I'd like to do is keep the paper in draft. Okay, we note the fact that there is a number that you've already gone through, Councillor Cubitt, but obviously you have a whole raft of these disturbing paraphrasing. So what I would like to do is to suggest that you email those in to Joe, copying in myself and the portfolio holder. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll have a look at them. Okay, and then we can move on if that's acceptable to you.
Sorry, Ms. Chairman, I'm afraid I appreciate that, but actually it's not acceptable. Firstly, I didn't use the word disturbing, to be honest. If you could just
no, I used the word disturbing.
Yeah. So I didn't use that. I'm concerned about the paraphrasing. I'm concerned that so I've raised much bigger issues than that. And so I don't think it's in relation to me per se. I did say to Joe earlier on today, I would really like to see all of the submissions. Could I just have the question before we enter into the document? How many respondents did actually engage in this consultation?
I don't have the number of actual respondents as such. The 1,700 is the amount of responses, as you say. But a lot of the responses are very long and very technical. So if we were to put all of those together into a document, it would amount to probably a good 1,000 pages, I would imagine.
But hang on, sorry, Joe, but with great respect, I mean, immediately what you just said tells me that those documents that are large and technical are the building and the construction lobbies, because they ain't going to be the residents and they ain't going to be the parish councils, and they certainly are not me or other members to a degree. So immediately that sends huge flashing lights. I hear you. I thank you for being accommodating, but however, I definitely now, and I believe that the rest of the members should definitely see the submissions in their entirety, like we normally see with a statutory consultation, so that we can weight the submissions that have informed the summary. Thank you.
Joe, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, I can understand Councillor Cubitt's points. Just to say, really, for this document, this was a summary high-level document for the purposes of committee only. On the website, there is a longer summary document. I don't know whether Councillor Cubitt has had a chance to look at that yet, which amounts to about 250 pages. It's a fuller summary. So I'm quite happy to sort of have that conversation with Councillor Cubitt around that and how much more detail should potentially be added to that. Also to say that all the representations are available online as well. So all the information is there and public. So this was really a high level summary for committee members only at this stage. I think it's also worth saying that this is not a statutory stage of consultation. So we haven't followed the course that perhaps Councillor Cubitt is used to in terms of the regulation 18 and 19, where we list all of the comments and we go back and give a technical response on those, because at that point we're looking at the draft plan. At this stage, it's non-statutory, it's very high level, it's about general issues. So the purpose of the paper was to give the committee a feel really for the themes that were coming out rather than the detail. So that is why the paper is as it is. But I'm happy to speak to Councillor Cubitt about what more we can do to provide information.
Thank you, Joe. I have to say that I was quite upset, okay, where in the phone call that I had with Councillor Cubitt this evening, because I don't expect paraphrasing to be incorrect, okay, and it does need resolving. However, I do actually have a hand raised for Councillor Harvey. Okay, so I'd like to bring him in at this point, please, very quickly.
Thanks, Chair. Just picking up the points here, I guess the issue is going to be, and this is no disrespect to anybody that's been involved in this thus far, I'd like to see the work that Annalie's talking about so that I could have a better understanding of really what we're talking about rather than the paraphrasing. And I'm sorry to say that to Joe and the team, because in a sense, what I'm stuck here is this two parts of the same thing, really. We can't really come to conclusions ourselves or debate the paper until we know the efficacy of the paper itself. And I don't wish to be disrespectful in any way. And I'm trying to be careful here with what I'm saying, because I don't want to be disrespectful to our officers, because I know how hard you work on this. I really, really do. But I'm just conscious I'd like to see that, Chair, in order that I can have a firmer view. And I'm worried I would come to a view on something that wasn't necessarily the interpretation of what somebody said, which is no mistake of anybody. It's just the way that it has been paraphrased. And that wasn't with intent either. And I know not
I'm sure
to anybody. I'm just saying, I think maybe we need to park this in order for that to happen before we really start getting into giving any views on this, because I might take the wrong opinion based upon the wrong evidence, the wrong statement made. And I wouldn't want to do that, because I wouldn't want to do a disservice to the person giving the view or a disservice to our officers in terms of what they've said.
Right. Okay. I'm happy to keep it in draft. I think Joe needs to go away and obviously have a discussion with Councillor Cubitt. But I do think there is some merit in actually going through the paper and just seeing what is actually there. Okay, at this particular time. So so that's what I'm planning to do. Okay, bearing in mind the fact that obviously it will be kept in draft, I think it is worthwhile just trying to find out exactly what the portfolio holder and officers are currently saying. Councillor Laura James, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I suppose for me, I assume when I was reading the document that those 1,700 responses were a complete response, and I thought that's how many people have taken part in the this consultation. So I suppose for me that's not how I read the document. And I also had some concerns because I was looking at, for example, 3.12, which is on density. And then when I looked at the question and some of the responses, I don't think what's in the body of the report reflects what's in the questions. And so I'm not sure, is this correct? Because I was straight away, that's just one example. I looked and I thought, well, I don't think that's what people are saying. They're not saying that they want higher density development. And did those people, because when you look at the responses, that's not what people were saying there. So for me, I have some disparities about the report as well. So I don't know where it leaves us. Is there value in looking at this now, or should we take it away and come back? Do we really want to go through this if we're saying in 3.2 that the population want higher density development? I can't believe that they're saying that. And if the evidence you give us in relation to the report doesn't reflect that, I don't think.
Okay, Councillor James, thank you very much. Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just noticing the recommendations. The contents of this report are noted. Well, we've noted them, and we feel that perhaps they don't accurately reflect the submissions made by those who joined the consultation. And any views on the outcomes of the consultation are expressed by the committee, so the cabinet member can effectively consider them as he goes along the process of developing the draft local plan update. Well, the cabinet member's been sitting into this debate. Whilst I don't always agree with him politically, he is a man who I have a huge amount of respect for the fact that he will like to get things right, and he will like to make sure that the views reflected by the public are reflected in the local plan. So I think because he's heard the discussion, heard the concerns, I don't know what the next process is, but I'm guessing this local plan is going to come back to the committee at some point for further commentary. Yeah. So I wonder whether or not it might be easier and smoother just for the cabinet member. He's got the full consultation, he's got all the officers around him, have read it in great detail. This sort of overview that we've got is not perhaps an accurate reflection, and he will understand that, and I look forward to his draft coming back. But probably we don't want to spend the whole night discussing a document where actually we're not sure, because it's been praised, and quite rightly praised down, because I wouldn't have had time to read thousands and thousands of commentaries. It's been praised down to a point where perhaps some of the accuracy has been lost, but perhaps it's harder to understand the comments. But I'm sure the cabinet member is all over it, and let him do the work. That's my view.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Feld, you want to come back? Just want to finish eating your sweet.
Well, I was trying to work out from that whether in between that wonderful array of compliments, whether Councillor James is suggesting that we do plough on the understanding that we may not have got an accurate picture of all the comments, and we need to reflect on all the comments thereafter, and the fact that the process, we're going to go over all of what we're going to say tonight again, some of it pretty soon, because we've got a map on the 11th of March and another one on the 31st of March, which will touch on some of these topics. You know, I agree with what people are saying. If you're not happy with the way it's expressed, it may inform your views. But on the other hand, two things come to mind. Knowing the members of EPH, Chairman, they are all knowledgeable and wise people. We don't necessarily need to hear in great detail what everyone has said for them to hold their views, because they have got the gist of what has been said in many cases. And I'm actually here really to hear the representations they make, having been informed by the consultation as best as possible. And I don't feel as though I'm thwarted in listening to members tonight. Indeed, I'm poised to listen, because I'm about to, if it's appropriate to introduce this, that's a matter for you, but if it is, I'm about to suggest some hot topics where I know there'll be different points of view, but I want to hear them. So we have an opportunity tonight. I'm listening. I know the intelligent councillors can articulate their viewpoints. I'd like us to move forward if it's possible, but I'm in the committee's hands. I can't make you go forward. We do need to use time wisely in this process. And I hope all members think that, well, if we went through the paper and we touched on a subject where members thought, well, hold on a minute, you know, this is one where we really need to just check what people are saying. Perhaps we'll park that one and come back to it. I don't disagree with parking this meeting part heard until another time, if that's what we decide as a committee. But I don't want us to lose the time if the committee feel it's appropriate to get on with it. But I'm not being reckless and saying get on with it if we're misinformed. So committee, hear me, I'm trying to have a balanced view on this. And if you take the view that you really are caught unaware of what they're saying or unsatisfied, then obviously you'll go a certain way. If you think actually whatever we're being told, it's only going to be nuances on certain things that are quite specific, and meanwhile we all know what we want to say on it anyway, and we think that we've got sufficient evidence from other people who actually support our view, then we can plough on. So I'm in your hands. I can't decide for you.
Thank you, Councillor Raffel. Councillor James, you've got your hand up again. Is that something that you want to interject, or no? Okay, all right. Well,
so Mr. Chairman, can I just? Yeah, I mean, can I thank the portfolio holder, and I just, for example. And I don't know the answer, and I think the committee, he's absolutely right, have to make this decision. But for example, on page 31, and this is why maybe there is merit in having us go through the paper, it says there was general support for new homes being delivered in Basingstoke Town Centre. Well, I'd like to know who and where that support came from, because I couldn't have been more explicit in my submission that I don't believe that houses should be built in Festival Place or in Basingview. In fact, I state explicitly throughout my submission that no houses should be built in Basingview. So it would be interesting, because I can't see lots of parish councils saying they think new houses should be built in the town centre. So who is it? And that's the nub of my point from the beginning of this agenda, is that there are inherent conflicts, and until we subset the responses into construction industry and democratic voice, then we can't say, oh well, okay, lots of our residents want to build housing in the centre. So I welcome the committee's view.
thank you, Councillor Cubitt. If you can just take your hand away, please. Okay, that will be superb. I am minded, okay, to actually recommend that the paper be taken away and the answer, I'm paraphrasing, checked and then brought back to committee. Do we have any support for that? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And I think we've got a consensus of support there to actually have the paper taken away. It's still in draft, okay, and to look at the paraphrasing and be brought back to committee at the earliest opportunity. Okay, Councillor Miller.
Just a thought. If we're not going to address this, I've been through through this particular paper tonight, and I had the unfortunate position of being in your chair on the previous local plan. And I think, yes, we did start off in a similar way, because we had these summaries, because that's all you can really deal with in a committee like this at this time of night. Because, you know, if we were going through this paper now, we'd never get there because we'd run out of time. There's something here. I can see there is focus on individual elements of how we want to see, what we want to see in the local plan. Something I found missing has been brought up at development control for years now, and the frustrations of members, and it should sit, the solution sits in the local plan, is our control over developers. And what we want to see as a borough, as members in the local plan, to give us more strength to what developers are going to provide us. At the moment, we can only ask them to provide the infrastructure for broadband. We can only ask them, are you going to put solar panels on your roof? We can only ask them to do these things. We've got no teeth. And it's something that has come up time and time again. I might have missed it in here, because I know this is to do with the consultation and everything else. But the other thing that we need to do is also included in the local plan, those kind of policies that can give this borough and the local planning authority the strength of imposing what we want to see in the borough. Lots of them are in here, densities, housing mix, everything else, all that is part of the local plan. But I think that is going to have to be extracted as well from the next iteration of this. The maps are going to be helpful in bringing that about. But those are the kind of things also that's going to help the officers formulate and structure the local plan, because this goes into an awful lot of detail, and it's going to take us time, as it did last time, to go through it and then formulate those into the policies that we need. Hope that helps.
Yes, but it doesn't kind of help us today. So thank you. Thank you very much.
I think you're going the right way today, but just bear it in mind. This has got a long way to go.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Miller. I've got Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you. I think what Councillor Miller's just said is absolutely correct. But again, I talk about the flashing lights and Joe making reference to these very complex technical documents that have informed our summary. Now, we all know that they've got huge amounts of money and they've got enormous ability with a huge team to submit extensive technical documents. And I don't want this issues and options consultation, which I thought brought out some brilliant issues, and I was really keen to submit to them because I think they're wonderful, and I think much of what's been done is great. I just think we need to separate what the lobbyists want and what the democratic will is, because they are not aligned, and that marries with Councillor Miller's comments.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cubitt. Councillor Raffel.
Chairman, I'm conscious that we have a map on the 11th of March, which, if I remember rightly, is the joint EPH and the other committee, whatever it's called, one looking at the draft WSP study on climate change, and and the policy options that will include the sustainability of new buildings. And that, of course, is touched on in this consultation. I'm also conscious of that we have a map on the 31st of March to look at the policy options for improving design quality in the borough and design codes. I think members who are on that ought to be informed and accurately informed of what the issues and options have said about those topics before they enter those debates and discussions and stopped really getting their hands into policy. So whatever you decide to do now, either deal with those two topics now because you can, because you know that it's not the end of the road. In fact, we're all pretty up to speed with the difficulties and the challenges and what we want to achieve in relation to both sustainability of new buildings and design policy. And you could deal with that tonight. So it's all in sequence for those maps. Or if you are persuaded, Chairman, that by the committee that also needs to be looked at, then I'd ask officers to prioritise those two areas first, send it round to the relevant members of EPH and who's on those maps in particular, but all members of EPH, of course, so they can read the comments in advance of those meetings and we don't lose those maps moving forwards. Whatever way we want to do it, we want everyone to be properly informed. And so either see if you can deal with it today, because I was looking through and I was thinking to myself, quite understandably, the economy you want to have a good discussion on. Spatial strategy is absolutely central, but actually climate change and including transport, we could all talk about it for weeks, but we've been talking about it for months and years, and we're going to carry on talking about it. And I'm not too sure that there's anything in this that doesn't tell us what we already knew would be in it. So I'm just wondering whether, as a committee, you could sort of give it its, we've noted that, thank you, we know we're about to go into depth in it. There's nothing particularly in that section that should delay us tonight, or if there is, explain what it is, of course. Creating beautiful places, again, it really doesn't matter too much how the consultees suggested things, because we're going to go into depth and we're going to look at design codes and standards and look at whether they will work for us and whether we can impose them on developers and really wrestle with it in depth. And so whatever's been suggested, whether it's good enough or not good enough, or says we shouldn't do it or should we do it more, we're going to be wrestling with that. And they're quite discreet. And I wonder whether you feel as though you could carry on, but then park the others, which perhaps need further assessment. I don't know where you would be on nature and the historic environment. It's such a broad area that the chances are all of you have got lots to say on it. And obviously providing new infrastructure well, that's the I was going to say AOB at the end of everything, isn't it? Infrastructure now, yesterday, 20 years ago, and not 20 years time. You'll definitely want to discuss that in depth and be interested in what people have said, I'm sure. So there's a suggestion. Can we deal with the two topics prior to the maps? Or if you can't, can we just ask for officers to, with Councillor Cubitt's assistance, however she's going to deal with it, to get the fuller information out in time for those two maps? Because I really don't want them being delayed, if that can help.
Certainly. I know we've got Councillor Harvey and Councillor Cubitt to come back in, but Joe's just raised her hand. So I'd like to hear comments from Joe, please.
I was just saying this, that it would be worth probably at those maps feeding back on the responses as a starting place for both of those maps, and we can do that through that process quite easily.
Okay, Councillor Harvey, please.
I think that's a constructive way forward, because I think if I get what Mark is saying, I agree with him. I think if we've got those maps coming up, to have we've got those how many questions are in this in terms of spending this evening going through each of these, working out which one we can talk about and which one we can't talk about, what rule is, what correspondence is correct, what paraphrase text is in a different direction and maybe shouldn't, and so on. But if you do a summary in the right way that we're talking about it, it could be done in that way, or pointed at least referenced to the main full documents of material that we ourselves can go and have a look at ahead of the meeting, which would be helpful again. Then I think that would work, because then at least we're getting the information ahead of the maps. We don't slow it down for Mark. We're the information in front of us. We've had a chance to review it. And also, I think the one that stood out for me, if I'm being honest here, is CPRE supporting greater density. When I read that CPRE was supporting greater density housing, I just thought to myself, now, where does that come from? Because that doesn't seem right. Of all the people at CPRE supporting greater density housing, I would be surprised. But that aside, if we can follow that route, I think that would be constructive, and I would support that.
Okay, so basically, I just want to see a show of support for taking the documents away and then coming back to the committee, okay, for the two items ready for the map. Do we have support for that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I think it's very clear. Okay, I don't need to vote on that. I have to say that I think what needs to happen, Joe, is unfortunately, there's been doubt cast, on the paraphrasing, okay, and I think that needs to be gone through, okay, and split out, like Councillor Cubitt suggested, okay, the paraphrasing checked, and then the two items that are in the paper that are ready for the maps should be sent to committee, so we can thoroughly, ingratiate ourselves with the actions. Councillor Cubitt.
Yes, thank you very much. I want to repeat, it's not the paraphrasing per se, it's actually the industry categorizing that is the key. So I thank you very much for being so understanding as a chairman and portfolio holder, and I thank the officers, but it's about the category, the industry category responses, that it's more important than whether I've been paraphrased or not correctly. And the number of respondents I think is key. And of the number of respondents, how many of them were the National Builders Association and construction industry, and how many were democratically elected people, and how many were parish councils? I think that's the key, and I think what the portfolio holder suggested is great, and Joe, and I think in a funny sort of way, because if we just go back to what we're supposed to be achieving tonight, it says that this is going to inform the LPU process, and what we're supposed to be debating today are the key responses. And I don't believe at the moment with this document we have a true three-dimensional ability to understand those responses at this juncture. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. But to be brutally honest with you, I am also concerned about the paraphrasing, because you've given a couple of instances where the paraphrasing has said one thing and you in your submission have said another. So it's cast enough doubt in my mind, certainly, and probably the rest of the committee, okay, that the paraphrasing does need to be checked. Councillor Raffel.
Chairman, I want to begin by, of course, thanking the officers preparing this report. I don't want them to feel as though that this is a criticism of them. It's not. We are dealing in a difficult world. Everything is online, and there could have been other opportunities in the normal world of saying, come in and read it. We can press print. Come in and have a look. What do you want to see? We've categorized it here. It's over there. Come in and have a chat about it. We can't do all of that. And the nature of what we're dealing with is turning into a little bit last minute. Things like this come along, and it's difficult for officers to prepare for them. It's difficult for us members to anticipate them until one of our number has looked in depth at things. So can we all bear with us and just put this down to experience at this point? I'm going to ask that the officer team see whether, and it may be impossible, but whether we can get the papers out just a little bit earlier for committees. We've had sort of a bit of a run of meetings, what with full council and another full council threatened, and other things too. And I suspect as members, it's not always easy to keep digesting things, especially for some of you who are constantly reading things online. But if we can get the papers out a little earlier, and if the quid pro quo from the members is, please, if there are problems, try and see if we can build in a bit more alerting everyone to the issues sooner. I am grateful to Councillor Cubitt for alerting firstly the relevant officer, and then me, and then the chairman in quite properly today in advance, so there was no sort of car crash in front of you. It was all quite well understood that these issues needed to be understood, and the relevant officer, the chairman, and myself had time to reflect upon it. But going forward, if we're going to deal with this amount of detail, we all as members need to have the papers a little more advanced. Then we need to build in reading them a bit more in advance, and then we need to let officers know a bit more in advance, so that possibly if this is not, there may have been the opportunity for this to have been resolved before the meeting, because, for instance, what's online and the wider report could have been notified, digested, and you may have had a chance to consider that actually the points were less serious. We don't know if they are or not, but or at least a chance to put them back in and deal with them appropriately. So I'm just trying to say, let's all learn from this. It's no one's fault that it's come to this. Everyone's trying to get to the same place, and as you can imagine, trying to summarize a massive volume of material into something that's understandable and trying to pour out conclusions in a neutral fashion for us. And that's the difficult part, because the officers aren't partial in this. They are doing their best to weigh up, as they see it, matters for you, but they will remember from the previous local plans that you're eager beavers and you'll want to go burrowing around in things, and we've just somehow got to build that in so that you can have your burrowing around and then go, ta-da, I found this and I'm happy and it's all okay. So and we'll put it down to learning, and I know the officer team are very broad-shouldered and very experienced with all of you and your predecessors, and what you get up to, but we'll learn from it, I'm sure. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Fell. I would just like to reiterate in the fact that, I mean, I hadn't read and studied the report, and until it was brought to my notice this evening, okay, I was quite happy to debate it, as I'm sure everybody else is. I just think that even though there's just been a couple of examples that have been brought to mind, it just unfortunately, certainly in my mind, establishes that there is a doubt over the information. And I think Joe and Ruth's team, Joe and Matt and Andrew have worked exceedingly hard on this. And paraphrasing is always difficult. It is, okay, but where we have, we've been shown to have a couple of examples tonight where the paraphrasing hasn't been quite right. Okay, I think it needs to be taken away and looked at again so that we can all then further understand you know, and hopefully grasp the true the picture. So I'm sorry, Joe and team, that it gives, you know, everybody some more work, but I think it's the only way forward, you know, and so therefore I'd like to say that the paper needs to be kept in draft. Okay, we won't be discussing it tonight, and if you could please, you know, take the subjects away, okay, and come back to us with the creating beautiful places and spatial strategies after just double checking the information, it would be much appreciated. Okay, thank you very much. Right. So after that particular bombshell, okay, we then go on to review of the work programme. Okay. So as you can see from there, we've had from the work programme, there's been 2 papers this evening. Okay, that's to be kept in draft. Sorry, just making some notes for myself. Okay, and we've had the Economic Recovery Framework, okay, from Jack Kennedy. Therefore, we have a COVID-19 motion which has been scheduled for the start of next year. Okay, and review of the motion. I would also like to, you know, put in that we've got the SS9, okay, the SS9 policy, okay, report, okay, and that's coming in for the 10th of June. Our meeting on the 10th of June. Okay. Does anybody have anything else to add? Councillor Laura James.
Thank you. There's just a couple of things, and I want to try again. I try this all the time, but I wrote to members in response to the questions in relation to the annual monitoring report, and we had a response to housing. But what I want to say is we're housing lots of families in flats. What housing is saying, they're reluctant to change the housing allocation policy. I sent an email today, so I don't know if anyone hasn't seen it, but you'll see an email. But they don't want to change the housing allocation policy. So, but what is it? Is it a chicken and egg? The developer develops 2-bedroom flats because we have a housing allocation policy that says that they will house families. And I would just like, in planning terms, for us to explore this policy. We're told that we can't discuss this because it goes to scrutiny, the housing allocation, but I just want to pull out from the housing allocation policy the aspect of flats, because the annual monitoring report said we're building as many 2-bedroom flats as 2-bedroom houses. So I just think it's an issue. So I just would like to ask again whether is it this administration's wish to continue to build flats to house families? I suppose that's what I'm asking. And then the other one is, in the annual monitoring report, and I did raise it, is all the number of studies that are there on page 60, and they're significant studies, and as they're coming forward now, I'm asking for hard copies of them and looking at them, and they're really substantial documents that inform policy, and we don't get sight of them now. And I really think that one, for example, there's the retail main town centre study, and Ruth said that we would discuss them in maps. I don't know whether we'll be able to have that amount of detail in maps, or I just think that members of this committee in relation to policy should have sight of these documents and look at how they're going to inform work. So Ruth, I don't know if you can help us on this one, because I just think they're so important, these documents we have. There's if I just go through some of them, the water cycle study, the landscape character assessment and landscape sensitivity assessment, leisure and recreational needs assessment, and it goes on. There's loads. There's a strategic housing market assessment. And I just think that it's so important that we see these strategic documents that are going to inform policy, and we have an opportunity to debate them, really.
Thank you. Can you just point me to where the studies were listed? I know you.
They're in the annual monitoring report, and it was in the committee meeting of the 14th of January, page 60 of the annual monitoring report, and it lists all of those studies.
Okay, if I just, you mentioned it this evening in, was it page 8?
That's in the minutes of the annual monitoring report.
Sorry, yes. Okay, let me just, okay. I'll request.
That's just a few of the.
Page 15 of the agenda this evening, fifth bullet point down.
Yeah, but that's only a few of the assessments that are taking place. If you go back to the original document or the annual monitor, there's significant assessments that are there. And I think they're very interesting documents to read. The leisure, recreational and needs assessment. I was just doing a piece of work in relation to that, in relation to the task and finish group. But then when I started to ask questions about it, it's now incorporating community centres, and it's also incorporating open space, and also in relation to the amount of open space that we're going to want on development. So what changes are happening there? I just want to understand that. I'm still waiting for the officers to come back with me, and that's going to be coming back to me on the work that they're doing on this. But so for me, I just think they're very important documents. And I know you're desperate to speak, aren't you, Ruth?
I am desperate. I've taken my mic off mute, and Chair, if you'd just let me answer the question, would that be okay?
Certainly.
So basically, all of the evidence reports and work that the team have been working on doing will be coming to EPH as part of the policy formulation for which it informs. So it won't be that with every single item we would have a report for every single item, but those are items which Joe and the team have commissioned that they're formulating to help inform the policy, will actually then come to EPH with the policy report, with the policy recommendations or suggestions, and those technical reports will also be appended to those, helping to inform the direction that you'll have before you. So it won't be so much that for every single item we will have an individual EPH report, as otherwise we won't be at a draft local plan by December of this year if we took that approach. However, a number of those pieces of evidence will inform the housing policies or the design policies or other specific elements. I don't know if there's a better way of explaining this, Joe, than what I just have, if you wanted to add to this at all.
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. I think we've agreed, sort of with the portfolio holder, that there are a process of maps. So we have the local plan update map, which we've established, which all EPH members can come along to. And those are sort of the mechanism that we're going to discuss, the really detailed information. So all of the evidence-based studies are going to the maps, and that's already started that process. And through that, we're starting to look at policy options. And we will have a number of maps. The first maps tend to be giving the feedback on the evidence, presentations from consultants, etc. And then we'll have further maps actually looking at the policy wording, which you'll recall is what we did before. Because obviously these are very detailed discussions, it's very difficult to have so many discussions about so many detailed topics at EPH committee, which is why the map has been set up, so we can make sure that we get through this process in a timely manner to get to the draft plan when we need to by the winter. Key issues will obviously come back to EPH, and all of the policy will come back to EPH as a whole for members to comment on that, as will spatial strategy and site issues as well. But the evidence base was to be discussed in detail through the maps.
Is it worth just pointing out to members, in case they miss it, the documents. So when they are, so we now have the retail and main town centre study. Is it worth just bringing that to the attention of members on this committee so that if they want to have sight of it, they know it's there and ready for them to look at?
I mean, that's what I'm doing. As soon before we publish any bits of evidence base, I'm circulating a summary note and a copy of that to all members of EPH. So you do all have that. And so then we will be having conversations as well through the maps with the consultants.
Are you happy to leave it there, Laura, for the time being?
It's not me, it's the committee. What does the committee want? I'm just raising it. I'm going to read the reports as they come forward.
Sure. I mean, I have to say that as long as the studies are attached to the relevant areas, that we can actually look at the base data and see how it's been interpreted, then I'm quite happy with that. Is everybody else? Okay, so there's a couple of people there.
What about flats? Can I just push the committee on flat policy? What are we all saying? Are we still happy to house families in flats? If you look at the AM report.
I think I'm minded to look at that when the housing policy actually comes back to EPH, okay, at the back end of next year, okay, because
can I just say to you that when I wanted to do that, what we were told, we can't discuss it by Kate because it isn't part of the housing strategy, it's part of the housing allocation policy, and the housing allocation policy goes to scrutiny. Now this is a policy, but at the same time we're building flats. So what I wanted to explore, Ruth, and I don't know if you help me, can we shape what is being built in relation to flats outside of housing need? What shapes what? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Councillor James, let me take that away. I'll come back to you. Okay. I don't want to duck the issue. Okay. I just want to make sure that it's covered. Okay. And that my response is appropriate for you. Okay.
Ruth, the question though. So Ruth, if I'm concerned, in the AM report, it says that we have as many flats being built 2-bedroom as. What determines those flats being built? Is it our policy or is it, how does that work?
So we've actually commissioned some evidence which helps us with our housing market needs, which will inform the housing policy around the mix and size of properties, which would need to then formulate housing policy around for the local plan. In terms of council's housing strategy and the work that Kate Randall leads on, I'd probably defer to her for a comment on that. In terms of the decisions that the members will need to make around the housing policies, those will start to be formulated over the next 6 months. I think, Joe, we've already had one EPH map on housing. We've actually already looked at that piece of evidence around what was coming out from what the SHMA was actually saying. So I'm not quite sure, Councillor James, you're making a comment around who occupies the flats rather
So what
than...
I'm saying is, so you're waiting for Kate to influence that. So Kate then says her housing allocation policy says that 2-bed is choice-based letting. So people, so it's in a sense, Kate's policy is influencing what we're building.
No, in terms of council's housing policy, I couldn't make any comment on that. What I'm talking about is our strategic housing market assessment and what it's saying we need in terms of housing mix, size, those sorts of aspects. So, Joe, do you just want to clarify technically what it is that we've commissioned that informs the housing mix? We had that an EPH map, I think, a month ago.
From recollection, I think it was last year potentially. Now it was a while back.
Yeah.
We had the housing market assessment, which went to the map. I think it was the first map that we had. But we will be coming back to a further map to look at the actual housing policies in more detail. So that will be an opportunity to do that. As we said, there's two separate issues here, really. I mean, flats are getting built for a whole number of reasons, as we know, because permitted development, and obviously because of some schemes as well that we've permitted through the planning process. There's that issue, and then there's also obviously the allocations issue. So at the next map, it would probably be worth inviting Kate along to that, and then we can discuss the issue more fully.
Great. Okay. So right, Dave George, Councillor George.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to come back on the issue of the maps of the available documentation, because and I just really want to make a general point. We had a recent map on the water cycle study, which was extremely useful, but the documents that it was based on were not available because they were still in draft form. And it did make the map process a little bit less than useful, should we say, because we weren't able to see the underlying documents. Could I suggest that possibly we could repeat that particular one on the water cycle study at some point? Or I know there's an opportunity for the Environment Agency to come again, but could I ask that if maps are coming on place, that the underlying documents are available, and if they are in draft form and not available, that we delay the map until it can be a little bit more, the documents can be available. Can I just make that point, please?
Just to come back on that, what we're generally doing is having the maps when the studies are very much at their advanced stage. So they're still draft, but they're pretty much there, so we can talk to members before they're actually finalised. So if any issues come up through the maps, they can be addressed then in the study. So that's why that we've taken that approach, and that's what we did the housing market assessment as well. For different studies, it's different. Some of them we have published where we haven't had a map, and that will go forward to other policy development. So it depends on the situation, but for the water cycle study, that's why we did it at that particular stage, so that members could have a look at it. As I've said to Councillor George, we will be circulating those studies to everybody at EPH, and then we'll be having a further map session on the actual water policies themselves. So there will be opportunities to discuss it.
I understand that, and I understand, but it is frustrating when you're being presented with the findings of a document that you can't see, and even in draft form you're not allowed to see. It's a little bit difficult to do that.
Thank you, Councillor George. Point noted. Councillor Cubitt.
Thank you. Can I ask a big favour? So we've got this back page, Agenda 8. And in view of the fact that so much of what we used to do, we did through the main scrutiny, is now going to be pushed through the map, could we have another page, which is all the maps, please, and the dates, and what the maps are going to discuss? And if somebody could send me a calendar on the maps, I'd be really appreciative, because I've been getting them, singly and then accepting them. And I don't know, I'd like a bigger kind of calendar of what, when, how. That's my first request.
Councillor Cubitt, yes, maps are dealt with by they're not usually DEM services, but I can liaise. So if you want going forward to have all maps listed, then we can stick that with the work programme. If that
would be amazing.
If you'd like, yeah, okay. That'd
be amazing. And Councillor George is completely correct, but in fact we haven't had the water cycle study yet. So I think maybe we need a map on the water cycle study when it's finished, because I don't think it's finished yet. If I could ask a couple of favours, I'd like to add to the itinerary going forward, if any of us, or if I'm elected, or if whomever is elected. Jack touched on the unemployed, and particularly the youth unemployed, and Councillor Woolridge very rightly, with her huge experience with connections, made reference to outreach and the hard to reach unemployed that have had a really hard COVID. And I wonder whether we could request not a long paper, but a brief paper after the election, maybe a little bit after the economy's opened up and the lockdowns are behind us, on how we're dealing with the hard to reach teenagers and young in our borough and in the town who are suffering mentally, and that would be a useful paper for us to see how we're actually reaching out to that community. In relation to the economic recovery report, Chairman, so this is just suggestions. Obviously, I'm just one person and everybody might disagree, but I'd quite like to know when that economic recovery committee meets. I'd like to know who they are, and I'd like a report of their findings. And on the same note, I would like formally for us to add into our provisional reports the LEP meetings, because this is an undemocratic organisation that operates in the dark, in the shadows, that seems to have enormous power over us and swathe over decisions that are made. And I think it's extraordinary that we don't have an LEP report on a regular basis to our committee on their findings, on their grant allocations, on the committee members of the LEP. We don't know. I don't know the answer. I went to 3 meetings last year to try and see what was going on, and it was fascinating. But I think it's incumbent upon the council to come to our committee to tell us what the LEP is up to, what their findings are, and what they're planning to do going forward. And then Councillor James made some really good points about who we're building for, and the interlinking between who the flats are for and who we're building for. And I think if we could have a map where Kate can tell us that we say to the housing provision that we, you know, who we want them for, who the affordable housing is actually being built for, and be a bit more prescriptive about that. And just finally, these studies that Councillor James is talking about as well, we're very good at producing reports, but on the task force that we just worked on, we fell upon a document called Built for Sports Strategy, and it was 2015 to 2025. And this is very important, committee members. It's really important. This is that we produce these wonderful documents, and we're talking about producing some more wonderful documents, but how often do we ask the committee to evaluate how we're doing in relation to the document that's been produced? And when we actually spoke to the officer concerned in relation to the Built for Sport strategy, which of course is not for our committee, it's probably for CEP, Councillor Gaskell, you might want to take this up, because I think you should take it up in the interest of our residents. And this isn't a criticism, it's an observation. We said, you know, what of the Built strategy 2015-2025 has not been achieved? And these are key questions that we should be asking our administration regularly in order to evaluate and audit whether those commitments that we've made, aspirations that we've aspired to, macro visions that we're trying to get to, are we getting there? And so specifically with the Built for Sport strategy, for example, there were some wonderful things that we said we were going to do, and they haven't been done. There was supposed to be a big, huge, multi-complex sports facility, and we're nearly 2025 and it hasn't been built. In fact, I don't even know where it's going to be. So these are kind of examples that it's wonderful what Joe and Ruth and their teams are doing, but I think as members, we have to be far more on it in terms of through the process, through the timeline, where are we, how are we getting to where we say we're going to get to, and then did we get there? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cubitt. Okay, just before we go any further, it's coming up to 9:30. Okay, I know we're on the work programme, which is one of the last items that we're going to consider, but I'd like the committee's agreement, okay, that we suspend standing orders until say 9:45. I think that will be enough time to discuss the work programme. Do I have agreement with the committee? Great. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now I'd like to go to Councillor Vaux, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up something that was in Councillor James's email, and Councillor Cubitt also touched on. Just to check whether the map has already happened, and that was relating to Councillor James' point 4, where she talked about the breakdown of affordable housing completions by tenure and housing associations, and how few socially rented units are being provided. So you know, this is about our policy. I mean, I know I'm saying what you all know, but it's just to make sure that I'm on the same page. This is about our policy on how our affordable housing is split between social rent, affordable rent, shared ownership, those kind of different affordable approaches. And the social rent is one of the things that I'm particularly keen to promote, because we do need more social rented properties for our workforce that we need, and to make sure we've got a real diversity in Basingstoke and the wider borough. So I just wanted to know, has that map that was looking at that already happened? Is that the one that was the housing one that was discussed, or have we got an opportunity to talk about that coming up?
That was in the annual monitoring report. It was further information we asked for relating to the annual monitoring report. So that it was just a question that we had asked. So we've had that meeting. It's an annual report that comes to us, but it didn't have the details. So we just asked for some more information.
But my question, Councillor James, is my understanding is that we have a policy document as a council about how we, you know, not just what proportion of housing in any development would be affordable, but also within that we allocate a algorithm, a proportion about what kind of affordable housing is within that. Now we have a policy as a borough.
So that's your local plan, and Joe, that's a 70-30 split, and I don't know whether we've agreed that. I think that's.
Yes. So my question is has that already happened for the local plan update, or have we still got that to come?
Shall I just come back on that, Chair, just to clarify?
Yes, please, Joe.
Yes. So yeah, we have had the initial map on that, where the consultants who did the housing market assessment came along and talked that through. So that has happened, but we will be having another map to look more detail at the actual housing policies themselves. So no doubt we will be able to discuss that issue again at that second map.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Harvey.
I was just going to ask that point about that map, because while we discussed the subject matter of the SHMA, what we didn't discuss was the policy. And I think the issue for me and colleagues is the policy at the moment is difficult because of the relationship, and it is a chicken and egg situation with Kate's side of this as well. And you're quite right, it's a vicious circle actually, because you get trapped in it. So if there is an opportunity to look at the policy, that's one element. I would agree that Kate needs to be there, because the other half of it needs looking at as well. And I'm conscious of what our social landlords go and do in terms of their responsibility to house people off our allocations policy and use of our allocations policy, and then what the developer side of them do in the context of wanting to stack flats, and the two don't always meet, as we're now seeing in development coming forward. So I think this is a really big issue, and if the map can't do it for whatever reason, it should come to committee. If for whatever reason the map is too small to do it, then that particular subject should come to the whole committee so we can have a good debate about it. But I'll leave it in your capable hands to make those decisions about where it should fit first.
Thank you. The one of the other things that I noticed wasn't on the work programme was the feedback on where we are with the green infrastructure report. Okay, that needs to be on the plan. Okay, so we actually go back to the original green infrastructure report. Okay, and see what's been done and where we are with that. Okay, so that definitely needs to be on. Okay, and so we'll get that sorted out for our next meeting. Okay. Councillor James, Laura James, you've got your hand on. So you're on mute, Councillor James.
Okay, so thank you. Yeah, I really would welcome that coming back, because what happened is after it was mentioned, I went away and looked at the 35 actions within that, and it really is worth you all looking at the green infrastructure strategy, and we need to review whether they've been done. And I think that we need to go back. It's just a learning really, and I'm learning really is, and I've been around for a while as a councillor, but we've got to go back on these strategies, and we've got to go back to the actions and look at look at them, because I think it was really interesting to do that as a piece of work. And when I looked at that green infrastructure strategy, in relation to my own ward, but in relation to the town, there were things that I was thinking, you know, that it hasn't been done. So I do think that we, in some way, in this umbrella of the Economic and Planning Committee, we need to have an understanding of what sits under their own policies, and we do need to regularly review those actions. And we were always going to get new policies and new documents coming forward, but it's that we don't lose sight. An example being, we had this massive document and we spent weeks and weeks discussing the 2050 vision. You know, where is that? And, you know, so I think we keep getting bombarded with another policy, and I think we just need to, has that now disappeared? You know, we need to review these documents, and it's a very interesting exercise if you have a bit of time during this lockdown.
Thank you, Councillor James. Okay, right. Sorry, you've got your hand raised again, Councillor James. Is there anything else? No. Okay, great. Okay, so sorry, Councillor James. Oh, have you got something to say or something further to say? No. Okay, all right. Okay, so that I think we'll, unless anyone else has got anything else to say, I think we'll kind of leave it there. Okay, thank you very much, committee. Okay, I know this is the last EPH meeting before the election. Okay, so I'd like to wish everybody well. Okay, and all I'm going to say is good luck. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, and we'll see you in council. Okay, bye-bye.